A frightened young man was running through the overgrown jungle, clearly trying to avoid some kind of danger. He had a red collar around his neck, and the ordinal number 2 was visible on his shirt. He heard a terrifying roar behind him, so he sped up, but in his haste he did not notice the tree root sticking out of the ground and stumbled. There was no time to lose, because the danger was very close, and from this realization the guy's heart began to beat at an incredible speed, and his eyes were full of despair. The monster from which the young man was running was already breathing down his neck, but his body was paralyzed with fear, and he didn't even have the strength to move. He simply lay on the ground, hoping to go unnoticed. But the miracle did not happen. The monster grabbed the guy lying on the ground and pulled him along. He did not even have time to grab onto something with his hand to resist. Such terrible secrets were hidden in the island lying in the middle of the choked waters of this area. A famous blogger named Samson went on air and greeted all his subscribers and fans on the channel. He was expressively leading his vlog and always fed the insatiable public with a dose of extreme and incredible energy. The public in the chat was intensely interested in where he was now and what he was up to. Speaking on the live broadcast, Samson warmed up curious fans by saying that he had been working on a big project for a long time and said that today he came to a special place for content. People in the chat continued to ask the guy about the essence of this intrigue. When the audience was already bursting with curiosity, Samson showed them the place he had arrived to. It was a deserted island, and there would be no staging for the audience, only reality. The chat was divided into those who were delighted and those who were dissatisfied. He told viewers that he had decided to make a VTube project about survival on an island and showed his team of 5 volunteers. The chat was bursting with activity. The blogger claimed that he had gathered these guys and that from now on they would be his students, and he, as a brave mentor, would teach them about life. The team included people of varying popularity, so the viewers of the broadcast were again divided into those who admired and those who criticized. Bloggers always need to keep the audience interested, and there are different ways to do this. Samson resorted to humiliating his team on camera. He called them losers and said that these weaklings would not last a day in the jungle. And it worked. The chat was buzzing with laughter. The VTube star claimed that from now on he would be a mentor and older brother for his team, and asked if the public would be interested in seeing the faces of these volunteers up close. Samson also informed his followers that he took these kids for 2 days of survival on a deserted island. While the blogger praised the reality of the events and rejected the possibility of staging, the guys were confused by his decision because they did not even take clothes with them. But the star in glasses ordered them to be quiet and just sign the agreement. It was a document of renunciation of the body. The girls were amazed that the document was real. But they were also confused by the content, because what would they have to do if they had to renounce the body? Samson spoke energetically to the camera, telling them that after surviving on the island, his team would leave this place as completely different people. He said that for 2 days, they would test their personal physical and mental limits. Samson called it a school of intense hardening. While the blogger was crucifying himself before the audience and insisting that his words were law, the thoughtful young man decided not to take an active part in this circus and simply remained silent and detached without reaction. Samson saw this and punched the guy in the face for being in the clouds in front of the audience and not appreciating his older brother. After such humiliation, the blogger allowed himself to throw his arm around the young man's neck and tell his subscribers about him. His name was Hal. He used to run a VTB channel dedicated to health. Samson also decided to tell everyone that this young man had beaten a man while drunk. The impudent, bespectacled guy continued to humiliate Hal and ordered him to make his face simpler. Samson said that he took this guy only because they went to high school together. The blogger continued to show off in front of the audience and said that Hal didn't even dare to raise his eyes to him out of hopelessness and fear. In fact, the young man was on the verge of breaking down. The idea of working for an upstart with money no longer attracted him. It only made him angry. But as soon as Hal heard that someone from the audience had donated 100 hangers-on, he immediately remembered why he had done all this. He needed the money very badly, so he stepped on his pride. Samson called on the boys to actively thank the spectators for their money, and they joyfully ran to carry out the order. The viewers donated both 100 and 200,000 won, so Hal slowed down and was no longer angry at Samson's unceremonious behavior. The guy with blonde hair, Kim, was so carried away by all this that as a sign of gratitude, he even decided to dance a wave dance for the audience. And Samson, to raise the activity, said that this guy will fulfill any wish for money. Suddenly, the famous cardiologist Surim, who was also the chairman and main investor of Samson's channel, joined the broadcast. The blogger was glad that such an important person joined the broadcast, so he told his team to greet him as best as possible. Suddenly, a colossal sum of 1.5 million won arrived from Mr. Surim. The team almost went crazy when they saw such numbers on the balance sheet. Samson even suggested naming the team after the chairman. Kim and Anna said that they would perform for Mr. Surim whatever he wanted, be it a dance or a song. They asked what their main sponsor wanted. Mr. Surim only briefly wrote that he wanted to hear a greeting from Hal. The team turned to the silent guy standing to the side, expecting some action. Samson said that this was the wish of the chairman himself, and he should be properly greeted for such generosity. Hal was struggling with his principles at this point, so he even clenched his fists. The blogger was already starting to think that the guy was going to just destroy everything here, so he got a little nervous. But the young man bowed and greeted the chairman. The chat was seething with comments about the power money has over people. While Hal was bowing, the blogger slapped him across the face with all his might, but this time as a form of praise. After this, Samson drew the attention of the public to himself by deciding to make an important announcement, which he heard from the fishermen. The chat was intrigued and eagerly awaited. The VTube star said that the fishermen always see someone heading to this island, but they have never seen anyone returning. And to seem more convincing, he leaned close to the phone screen and told the team to be careful, and the viewers not to take risks and not to repeat after them. The beautiful Lana intervened and said that it was all fiction, but Samson indignantly shouted that it was the truth and he was not lying. He pointed the camera at the frightened Mike and Kim and said that they should be careful always and everywhere. The blogger said that he would not stop recording content even if someone from the team disappeared, because everything is real. The chat was seething with comments. All subscribers wrote that it was staged. Samson was seething with anger because he wanted the public to believe his words. To prove to the audience that he was serious, he ordered his team to put their phones in a bag so that there would be no communication with the outside world. As soon as all the phones were in the bag, the blogger threw it into the sea with all his might. The chat and the team were perplexed. They did not expect this. While the VTube star was enjoying his actions and catching delight in the chat, his team did not understand why he had to do this. But Samson wanted to gain the trust of viewers at any cost. While he was saying that all this was true, and it was worth subscribing to his channel, the connection gradually worsened. Suddenly, the signal disappeared completely. Everyone in the chat was worried and did not understand why the broadcast was frozen. And then a notification appeared about the broadcast being stopped due to technical problems. The cheerful and loud blogger suddenly went quiet. He also did not understand why everything stopped. He asked his operator Vaughn why the VTube broadcast was interrupted. They answered that the signal was weak in these parts. The operators checked their gadgets and determined that not a single social network was working. Here and there was no connection either. Samson was upset because only 50,000 viewers had gathered. But the situation forced him to record everything on camera and then publish it. The operators had previously warned the blogger about the expected problems with the network and suggested filming somewhere closer, but he did not listen to them. Kim and Mike still couldn't believe that Samson threw their phones into the sea because it wasn't in the script, and besides, they were still paying the bank for them. The VTube star claimed that he had no other choice because people did not believe in the reality of this show. He also said that 50,000 viewers were watching them just now, and in less than an hour, more than 10 million won had accumulated in the account. Samson argued that it was necessary to be able to conduct such large-scale broadcasts and resort to various measures to restrain people. The blogger claimed that after the project was over, he would buy the guys not only phones, but even cars in exchange. The guys' faces immediately changed from such colorful promises. Samson also decided to talk to Hal about what was happening during the broadcast. He asked the guy not to get angry, because the cameras require pretense. The blogger said that after all this is completed, the guy will have the opportunity to pay for his mother's treatment, so he needs to watch his facial expression, so as not to spoil the atmosphere of the show. These words hurt Hal, because this impudent hypocrite manipulates the most important values of a person for the sake of his miserable show. Mike watched as Hal barely contained his anger. It seemed as if he was about to explode. He was distracted from his observations by Samson, who ordered him to quickly help the operators unpack their bags. Anna decided to check with the blogger whether he was telling the truth about people disappearing here. But Samson claimed that all this was a lie. He said that the island was uninhabited, so there was no one to disappear. The girl with the powder compact was still excited that the island was huge and something could happen. Samson was just waiting for some incidents to happen so he could film them on camera and post them on VTB. Anna squeezed his shirt and said that she could trust only him. The VTube star confidently declared that he, as the most important one, would solve any problems. The team, led by their internet leader, were determined to make a real hit in this place, not even suspecting what horror lurked in the wilds. Samson began recording, as befits an avid hunter of people's reactions, energetically greeting everyone and asking if they liked the jungle, then turned the camera to his team. While passing through the bushes, Lana suddenly tripped and fell on Kim, who almost fainted from surprise. The beauty grabbed the guy by the shoulder and was indignant about why they had to go so far along such a terrible road, and Kim enjoyed the contact with her hand. Samson pointed the camera at the jungle and announced that they would all spend the night here today. Mike was unhappy about having to sleep in the middle of the forest, but Kim was quite happy about it. Lana said that girls and boys would have to sleep separately. After these words, Anna, who wanted to sleep with her, pestered her with hugs. The cameramen shouted that everything was filmed and the footage was good. Samson said that it was terribly hot here and that they should shoot the next scene quickly. In order to do this, cameraman Vaughn volunteered to go to the things on the battery to the camera. Without letting go of her friend, Anna asked her mentor if they had something to drink to quench their thirst. Lana said with complete disdain that in order to cool down, they should move away from each other. Anna was not pleased to hear such a tone addressed to her, so she decided to smooth things over and asked her friend if she should bring her some water. But she only nodded distantly. The girl was very offended by her rude friend and did not understand why she was behaving like that, as if everyone here was not her equal. Anna still approached Samson and asked him to give them some water. Mike noticed his friend's strange behavior and asked where he was staring. Kim couldn't take his eyes off Lana. He said that she was really beautiful, especially in person. The fair-haired guy fantasized that the beauty had fallen on him on purpose because she had feelings for him. But Michael brought his friend down to earth a little. And although she was beautiful, Mike still couldn't understand why she was filming adult videos. Kim replied that it was all about money. The guys wondered why the girl quit that job and came here. Was it really to save her reputation? Second cameraman Rich said he was going to get a battery for the camera so he could start filming. Samson was surprised since Vaughn had just gone to get one. Rich made his way through the thicket and scolded his partner for his sluggishness. Suddenly, he stepped on a lamp that was just lying in the middle of the bushes. Rich was surprised that this thing was lying here. He picked it up to examine it. The guy heard some rustling in the bushes and decided to catch his colleague being lazy. He was sure that his friend was resting in the bushes, so he went there and said that Vaughn did not know how to handle the equipment, since even the lamp was lying in the mud. But as soon as Rich walked further, he saw complete chaos in their things and red puddles on the ground. The guy came closer to the red puddle and ran his finger through it to understand its origin. He realized that something had happened to Vaughn and began to get nervous. While Rich was thinking about who could have done this to his friend, the culprit of all this chaos woke up behind him. The operator heard a rustling sound behind him and suddenly grabbed a stone lying nearby. Fully prepared to defend himself, the boy turned around and ordered the mysterious killer to show himself immediately. But to his surprise, there was no one behind him. He even thought that he imagined it. But the monster liked to attack without warning, so it pounced on Rich from the other side. It opened its huge mouth and ate its prey in an instant. Meanwhile, Samson was already starting to get angry because quite a lot of time had passed since the operators went to the camera for batteries. And he also began to think that the guys were shirking their work. The blogger asked Mike to go after them and hurry them up. The boy didn't have to be asked for long. He simply silently agreed and went. Suddenly, he saw Vaughn, who was already approaching the guys with a loaded camera. Everyone started asking the guy if he had seen Rich along the way, but he claimed that they had not crossed paths. Samson did not believe that the operators simply missed each other and suspected some kind of joke. The whole team went in search of the missing Rich and came across that same destroyed camp with tattered things and a red puddle. What they saw left the boys speechless and they were momentarily stunned. The red puddle that was clearly left behind by a person was especially striking. Mike was horrified by the realization that someone here could get hurt and get injured at best, and at worst even die. Anna began to panic. Kim insisted that she needed to call the police immediately. They all put pressure on their leader with panic, but the blogger himself had something completely different in mind. He ordered the team to immediately stop hysteria and pull themselves together. Samson looked at Vaughn and told him to turn on the camera immediately. While the cameraman was trying to come to his senses, the blogger repeated in a commanding tone that he should turn on the camera right now. Mark and Kim were taken aback by his request, as they did not think this was the right moment for filming. Samson had already started to get angry. He said that panic should be stopped immediately and bad thoughts should be driven away from oneself. The blogger insisted that one needs to calmly assess the situation and that unnecessary fuss will not help here. The VTube star continued to insist on the importance of filming because this situation could help many in the future. He gave the example that these shots would serve as evidence of a missing person when they contact the police upon their return. In the end, he even wanted to investigate this case to the end since it had come to the disappearance of his cameraman. Samson said that the filming would last for about an hour, and then they would all come back. He also claimed that if they stuck together, nothing bad would happen. Hal objected to these words. He said it would be better not to go into the lair of danger at all, which caused a displeased look from the blogger, who was already barely coping with the intensity of panic in the team. Hay continued his thought. He argued that even if they stick together, the danger will still not be avoided. He insisted that a tiger could attack from around the corner at any moment. His words scared the boys quite a bit. Samson accused the guy of being stupid and was glad to take into account the fact that tigers were not found here. The blogger was drawn to the fact that safe content is not interesting to the public. He also said that he was not going to risk the team too much. He just wanted to look around and take a few shots, after which everyone would go to the beach. Hal insisted on the potential danger and did not give in to the persuasion of the VTB star. Samson came closer to the guy with complaints. He said that he was in charge now, so there was no point in inserting your unnecessary opinion in front of him. The blogger turned to the others and asked if they were afraid to go further. He assured that to become cool VTubers, you need to take risks. The team did not make contact because they really feared for their lives. Seeing this, Samson switched to manipulation. He said that he would no longer persuade anyone and shifted the responsibility for everything onto them. He reinforced this manipulation with a sense of greed. He said that now they themselves must decide whether they want to earn a lot of money, to last until the end of their lives or sit in safety and watch others earn this pile. Anna was inspired by Samson's words and said that she trusted him completely and was ready for any difficulties. Suddenly, the blogger was called out by some guys who noticed something interesting. There was a trodden path in the bushes along which mysterious tracks were visible, clearly belonging to a person, but none of them had entered these places. The thought that there was someone else on the island besides them drove the team crazy. Samson started getting angry at the guys again for their inappropriate panic. The cameraman had already managed to film his outburst, so the blogger ordered him to cut out the moment. Vaughn started filming again. The blogger cleared his throat and said to the camera that something unusual happened during his stay on the island. He said that one of the operators went to get things in the camp and disappeared. He also emphasized that they found a red puddle in the middle of their camp. Then the camera lens was directed at mysterious tracks in the bushes, and the VTube star, like in a detective story, was telling that he and his team were in danger because there was someone else on the island. Samson continued to convey all his experiences about what happened on camera, but stated that he did not intend to back down because his word given to the viewer was sacred to him. While the blogger was loudly insisting that he would not give up, his team was in mild shock. After all, it was hard for them to risk their lives. In the end, the VTube star asked viewers to reward his dedication to his work by subscribing to the channel and giving him likes. Filming continued, so the team, along with their bespectacled leader, headed into the jungle. The journey was long. The cameraman filmed every detail for better quality scenes. Although Kim had decided to go further, he still could not get rid of the trembling in his knees. Therefore, he told Samson that they had already gone far enough. The blogger himself didn't expect the forest to be so big, so he asked Vaughn to take the last shot. The cameraman said that the shot was good, and also emphasized that they had been filming for almost an hour. Samson realized that enough content had been made, so he informed the team that he had completed filming and was returning to shore. Suddenly, Mike noticed something unusual and called the blogger over to look. Not far from the boys, there was a large stone bunker, which attracted their attention. Kim took this place for the killer's lair or even a tomb, so he panicked again. Even Vaughn couldn't stand all this mysticism and asked the blogger to leave immediately. because he sensed danger with his skin. Samson angrily insisted on continuing filming and demanded that the cameraman fulfill his duties, who in turn called the VTube star inadequate. The blogger grabbed Vaughn by the collar and ordered him to film everything. He said that thanks to the 10 minutes of filming, the guy would never need to work again. Samson decided to take the initiative and rushed at full speed to the bunker door. The operator was horrified. When the whole team gathered at the door, the leader gave the command to shoot. Meanwhile, Mike looked at everything carefully and concluded that this place was most likely built for military purposes. The young man also noticed that the door to the bunker was slightly open, and he wondered how long ago this shelter had been built. Lana told Samson to call a ship immediately upon returning to shore, because she had agreed to this adventure only because of her faith in the blogger, but she did not want to tolerate this chaos. The genius in glasses replied that the ship would arrive only tomorrow, so she would have to be patient. The girl was outraged. Kim joined her words. He said he would never in his life agree to seriously risk his life even for a lot of money. Samson lost his temper. He claimed that he didn't know how it would all turn out and he was scared too. Meanwhile, he barely got himself in the mood for filming and warned the guys that he was ready to start. The blogger accused the team of negligence, talking about how hard he tries to maintain his reputation on the channel. Their quarrel got out of control and they literally forgot about the poor cameraman, who had nowhere to put in a word. But Vaughn plucked up his courage and shouted loudly to the crew that he was starting to film and everyone needed to look at the camera. He also said that he did not intend to listen to long quarrels, because he was also very scared and wanted to get out of here as soon as possible. But as soon as the guys were distracted from discussing their claims against each other, they saw something terrifying behind the operator and told him to turn around. Seeing the silent fear in the eyes of the team, Vaughn turned to look, but before the poor guy could even blink, the monster behind him mercilessly ate him. The guys watched in complete stupor as only the camera and red spots remained of their cameraman. This insatiable Tyrannosaurus stared at the others with its hungry red eyes. As soon as the monster sensed an opportunity to profit, it immediately rushed with its mouth open at our heroes. They were terrified. Fear literally did not allow them to soberly assess the situation. But fortunately, Kim remembered in time about the crack in the door and ordered everyone else to immediately run inside the bunker. The adrenaline rush made the team rush into the building and close this huge door at an unimaginable speed. The monster outside desperately tried to break down the door, but those who made it seemed to have taken everything into account. After some time, the monster stopped pounding on the door, and the boys breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, everything that had just happened dawned on Anna, and she began to sob bitterly. Panic and confusion overwhelmed everyone because they had just seen a dinosaur and Vaughn had been eaten before their eyes. While everyone was screaming and couldn't come to terms with everything that was happening, the VTuber star was thinking about his own things. He had already imagined what rating this material would have if they got out and hurried to share his joy with the others. Hay took a deep breath and addressed Samson in a calm tone. He said that he suspected something was wrong, which is why he initially suggested not to get into trouble. The guy was leading to the fact that a blogger should at least sometimes not think about content. Samson didn't like it when he was poked in the nose with the truth and doused with cold facts. The blogger said that he is perfectly aware of everything, but he is not able to influence events, so he told people not to poke him in the eye with complaints. The star's pride was hurt, so he tried to sort things out with Hal at full speed. Mike tried to somehow restrain him and calm him down. Samson, who has 3 million subscribers on the channel, confidently stated that he did not force Hal to come here and that it was a conscious choice of each. And he really did not understand why they were shifting responsibility for everything onto him. Hal was an ordinary guy who was temporarily out of the spotlight on VTube. He wasn't arrogant, just quiet. That's why he simply sighed in displeasure in response to Samson's provocations. And the blogger himself seemed to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He was thrown off balance by all these accusations. He also shouted that Hal himself had ruined his life, so he simply had no right to judge someone else for mistakes. The guy didn't expect Samson to get personal, so he silently listened as he was brought back to reality. Mike was an ordinary boy with little activity on his channel, but he was always sensitive to the problems of those around him. Even now, he was trying his best to contain Samson's anger. Lana intervened in this inappropriate mess. She sternly ordered the guys to calm down and pull themselves together. The girl had weight in society, because due to her profession as an actress in adult films and her stunning appearance, she had 130 subscribers on the channel and power over the male sex. Even now, She made the guys rethink their squabbles and start thinking about how to get out of here. Samson angrily suggested that Hal go out and looked around, since he was such a bold know-it-all here. Cutie Anna, despite her naivety, had 3.5 million subscribers on the channel and skillfully controlled her emotions to control people. In this case, she tearfully asked what would happen next so that her participation in solving the problems would be minimal. Kim was not far behind Lana in terms of the number of subscribers on the channel, but he was not particularly remarkable. He was always afraid of something and could not keep his emotions under control. Now he was listening for that monster behind the door. Samson told him to open the door and look instead of just standing and listening, but Kim refused. He pushed this important mission onto Mike, who clearly did not expect such instructions. Kim thought that since he was older, he had the right to delegate this task to the little boy. He urged the boy on and told him to open the door faster, but not too hard, so that the monster couldn't get in. Mike grabbed the latch on the door with trembling hands and tried to move it. Everyone held their breath and squeezed. They asked not to open it too much, because it was very scary. While Mike pulled the latch with an air of importance, the team watched in silence and cold sweat. Having applied all his efforts, the little boy said that the door would not open no matter how hard he tried. Samson accused the boy of not even serving in the army, which is why he was so weak, and ordered the others to help him with the door. Kim joined in and they began to try to open the bolt on the door together. And now all the guys began to try to move this huge bolt with their arms, but it still didn't work. Anna was already starting to panic because they were still stuck in this place. Hal exhaled and declared that the door was not giving in and that it definitely could not be opened by force. The question arose of what to do next, and while everyone was emotional, the blogger had already come up with something. Looking around, he suggested looking for an exit elsewhere because the room was quite large. He assumed that since it was written on the wall in front of them that this was move B, then A must be next. Kim expressed his fears that going into the unknown was quite dangerous. But Samson claimed that a ship would arrive tomorrow, and if they sat still, they would miss their chance to be rescued. Coward Kim suggested that one person go further, so as not to risk everyone. It is clear that he was counting on pushing this responsibility onto others in order to protect himself. Samson did not approve of his proposal, because in all horror films, people who split up always died one after another. Referring to this, he ordered everyone to silently follow him and not lag behind. The VTube star took out his phone, turned on the flash, and with a confident face led the team behind him. Mike noticed that it wasn't just a flashlight, but a backlight for video, so he asked the blogger why he was doing this. They didn't understand why they were filming content if their chances of survival were so slim. But Samson stood by his convictions. He said that after everything he had been through, he wasn't going to return empty-handed. While filming the mysterious tunnel, he decided to see this matter through to the end. Having turned on the recording, the blogger began to tell the public that he was stuck with his team in a huge bunker, and as always, insisted that all of this was real. Despite the fact that the guys were unclear where they were and what awaited them ahead, they still decided to go further. And as agreed, everyone stuck together to help each other and not get lost. Mike looked around and was surprised at how huge this place was. Suddenly, Anna sat down and said that her leg hurt a lot. She also asked to take a break because of this. Lana was indignant, because they hadn't even managed to walk much, and this girl was already whining about the pain in her leg. The beauty explained to Anna that if they spent time on her every whim, they would miss the ship. Anna insisted that this was not a whim, but a natural overfatigue from stress, due to which the body resists doing something. But Lana insisted that everyone here was tired, and they should stop whining for no reason. In response to such claims, the girl became furious and accused the beauty of bias. Samson immediately reacted to this showdown and decided to find out the reason for the quarrel. Anna was glad that he paid attention to them and began to press on his pity. The girl approached him with tears in her eyes and began to complain about her condition and Lana's accusations. The blogger felt like an alpha male. He was very pleased to solve these kinds of problems, especially when girls pressed themselves against him. He immediately took Anna's side and told Lana not to go too far, because in the team everyone always supports each other. Anna maintained her image of innocence until the very end, so she was the first to apologize to the beauty for her behavior in order to appear even sweeter and more defenseless. Samson hugged the girl in tears and said that they still needed to take a break, at least for 5 minutes. Anna's manipulation and acting still worked brilliantly, so she glanced at Lana with a smirk so that she would understand what influence she had. The beauty caught this look and understood everything perfectly. She definitely wouldn't trust this girl. Samson, in order to cheer up the team, declared that upon their return, they would have a real jackpot in their hands, and success would inevitably overtake them. This was all a treat for the ears, of course, but Lana was more interested in the ship's arrival time. The blogger replied that the ship would arrive approximately at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. While everyone was talking, Mike noticed a strange lump in the darkness that was making sounds. The lump stood up and started running towards the guy, who in turn got really scared. It was some kind of mutant bird and dinosaur with yellow eyes, only small. Mike came closer to this creature to examine it, and found this creation quite strange. The monster seemed funny to him. He even wanted to pet the little cutie. The boy was petting his new pet and noticed that there was some object lying a little further away. When he looked closely, he realized with horror that there was someone's human hand lying there, and a monster bird was eating it. Mike, in hysterics, rushed to catch up with the others to tell them what he had seen. The poor guy was so emotional that he screamed that he saw a severed human hand. This statement shocked everyone because one could expect anything from this place. Mike led the team to the place where the bird and the hand had been, but by that time there was nothing there. The boy did not understand how this was even possible, and the others considered his words an inappropriate prank. Mike turned to them and began to prove that he really saw a strange bird that was eating a human hand. Samson hit the boy, accusing him of lying, because everyone was already scared and he was giving them reasons. And no matter how much Mike insisted on the truthfulness of his words, they refused to believe him. The blogger left the guy alone with his fantasies and said that they were all leaving, and he could sit here and wait for the strange bird to return. Mike didn't intend to stay in that terrible place, so he immediately ran after the others. The boy didn't want to be alone so much that he tried his best to catch up with the team. The gloomy corridor led the team into a huge room, the scale of which the genie clearly did not expect to see. At their feet, there was a deep hole, the dimensions of which were unimaginably huge. The boys looked like small bugs against its background. Everyone began to peer into the depths of this hole to see what was inside, but it was all in vain, because due to such dimensions, the bottom was hidden from view, perhaps for good reason. Kim noticed a passage marked A on the opposite side and drew the team's attention to it. They were a little confused about why there was such a big hole in the bunker. They even assumed that it was some kind of secret management project. But Samson didn't care at all. It was much more important for him to film all of this and earn money. Hal noticed another exit from Mark C and suggested checking it out. But the blogger wasn't going to hand over the reins of power to him, so he insisted that everyone go to move A. The deed is done. The VTube star led his team to exit A. He claimed that this would definitely help them get out. For some reason, he was sure that the exit would be right here, so he suggested sticking to this route. As they got closer, little Mike suddenly became stunned and panicked, all because the guy saw the same creature that had scared him earlier. He immediately told the guys about it. They didn't really believe that such a cute animal could eat a human hand, so they didn't really react to Mike's warnings. Samson immediately began to film the wonderful beast, but little Mike continued to insist that it could be dangerous. Kim looked at the mutant and said that he considered him safe. The blogger in turn ordered the blonde to do something provocative for the viewers on camera. Kim was delighted with this opportunity. He said that he grew up in a village, so he knows exactly how to behave with birds. He approached the creature closer and stamped his foot with all his might to evoke a feeling of fear and respect. But the mutant did not react in any way, only stared at the guy with silent eyes. Kim did not want to fall flat on his face in front of the camera. He was unhappy with the calm behavior of this creature. The emotional guy continued to stamp his foot near the monster with all his might, wanting to somehow scare him. But this time he stood calmly and watched the nervous boy. Samson filmed everything on camera and continued to tease Kim, referring to the fact that the bird completely ignored all his methods of education. The blogger's ridicule awakened Kim's anger towards this creature. After all, he wanted to show a masterclass on poultry farming, but instead he failed. Mike tried to prove to them that such behavior could lead to bad consequences. Lana also did not consider this creature peaceful. Kim imagined himself to be a famous beast tamer. He noticed a piece of pipe in the corner and decided to show the monster what people are capable of. He justified his behavior by saying that this strange bird must know about the human danger. It was extremely important for him to make the monster afraid. Kim grabbed the pipe and rushed screaming to prove to the bird who was in charge. The guy swung and tried to strike, but the monster deftly dodged. The bird's calm gaze only further irritated the furious youth. After loud threats, Kai was still able to hit the creature, which he himself did not expect. Samson was pleased with the convention and continued filming, while Mike watched nervously, knowing that something terrible was about to start. The strange bird got angry but still remained calm. Kim himself did not understand how to react to his actions, but he said out loud that he did everything correctly, as the book teaches. The animal gave a signal to its fellows for reinforcement, and they began to approach one by one. First one, then the second one followed him out of the dark corridors, and after a few seconds they had already managed to surround the team from all sides. At this point, Anna began to panic and ask about further actions. Samson decided that the best solution would be to simply ignore them and quietly leave. They all quietly grouped together and began to move on, looking back warily. Mark and Anna were sweating with excitement when they turned around. After all, the birds were looking intently at their backs and seemed to be waiting for the right moment. And as soon as the team took the first steps towards the exit, the monsters immediately rushed to attack. Lana was horrified that these birds were literally pursuing them. Samson also did not understand why these creatures were running after him, as if 5 minutes ago he had not provoked Kim to beat their relative. The blogger saw a wall marked A and told the guys to quickly run there. He was sure that this path would help them get out of this terrible place. But around the corner, an unpleasant surprise awaited him in the form of the remains of human bodies and even more monsters. The feathered creatures with grins and red eyes immediately noticed the replenishment of food supplies. Samson saw a human hand in the mouth of one of them and realized that Mike was right then. While the blogger was accepting the harsh reality, Anna drew his attention to the fact that these were all surprises for today. The fact is that the birds of prey surrounded them from all sides and were very unfriendly. One of the monsters had already chosen Anna as his victim and started running towards her. The girl froze in horror and did not know what to do next. Hal volunteered to help her, and with one blow he stopped the monster from attacking. The rest of the feathered representatives watched as their relative was beaten and were ready to take revenge. Their eyes filled with anger, and the whole flock decided to ask for the command at the same time. Hal realized that the situation had become tense and that something had to be done immediately. So the daredevil snatched the pipe from Kim's hands. The guy used this piece of metal to fight off the angry birds like a sword. This behavior only provoked the monsters more, so they attacked with even more enthusiasm. Hal told the boys to get out of here immediately while he distracted the birds. The guy shouted that everyone needed to run to exit C to be saved. The team ran away without a second thought. Only Lana was worried about Hal and his life. But the guy was determined to hold off this pack as long as possible, even if it cost him his life. Hey, despite the fact that the monsters surrounded him, tried with all his might to take this blow upon himself and save his comrades. The ferocious birds attacked the young man mercilessly, wanting to eat him completely. It seemed that for Ham, the story ended there. Meanwhile, Samson ran with all his might with his team away from the monsters. The blogger looked around on the go for somewhere to hide to avoid the angry birds. And finally, they came across a door that could save their lives. Samson, on adrenaline, opened the door with incredible speed and burst into space. Lana immediately rushed past him, urging the guys on so as not to lose their chance for salvation. The girl made sure that each member of the team entered and looked hopefully into the distance of the corridor, hoping to see Hal there. Samson nervously demanded that she immediately close the door, but the girl still wanted to wait for their savior. But in the distance, the cries of birds could be heard, which were approaching very quickly. Kim began to panic because these monsters would soon be at the door. To be honest, it wasn't just him. The VTube star was also nervous and demanded that this door be closed immediately. Lana stood her ground. She believed that it was wrong to treat Hal like that. Samson, through clenched teeth, repeated that the guy had already died and they all still had to survive. While they were figuring out what to do, at the end of the corridor, the shadows of monsters were already visible. Approaching, the blogger brazenly pushed Lana away from the door because he didn't want to risk himself to save the guy he hated. He leaned his whole body against the door and immediately began to close it. But just as the door was about to close, Hal's hand suddenly crept through the crack. The guy was completely exhausted because he ran and fought back with all his might. The feathered monsters were already almost at the door and with a great desire to deal with the offenders. Samson literally closed this door in one breath and held it so that the monsters could not get to them. The blogger made sure that the monsters wouldn't get to them and finally let go of the door. The VTube star decided to draw the team's attention to his enormous contribution to their rescue, namely how he brilliantly calculated the time to close the door. But the team's attention was focused on the real hero who sacrificed himself for them. Everyone admired Hal's dedication and were seriously concerned about his wounds. Anna wanted to help him somehow, but the guy assured her that he could bandage himself. And Samson continued to shout about how masterfully he closed the door, devaluing Hal's act. But no one really cared about the star and glasses. They were more interested in how Hal managed to escape from the clutches of the birds. Anna admired the boy's bravery in a gentle voice because he fought a whole pack of monsters single-handedly. Flattering words addressed to Hal literally cut Samson's ears because he was not used to sharing admiration with someone, and even more so to being in the background. Mike was sincerely happy that Hal managed to fight off the birds with an ordinary piece of iron, so he spoke about it without hiding his emotions. Samson interrupted the boy's positive attitude and called out to him with all severity. The blogger, with eyes full of contempt, asked the little boy what he was happy about and why he was so cheerful in general. But Mike explained that he just couldn't contain his delight, because the fact that Hal was alive was cool. Samson said in all seriousness that there was nothing cool about it, because anyone could have saved themselves with such a piece of iron. He also said that if the guys really idolized Hal so much, they might as well go further with him. The blogger said that he does not want to deal with those who do not recognize his magnificence. No one expected to hear this, because Hal really did risk himself. But they didn't argue either. The guys began to look at the room they found themselves in. Everyone felt a bit creepy about this place. While Hal was recovering and trying to rest a little after what he had experienced, Samson suddenly turned to him. The blogger told the guy not to put on an act and not to waste their time, because they needed to move on. Out of little intelligence, the Vituba star also insulted him properly, after which he ordered everyone to follow him. The team desperately tried to understand what place they had ended up in, because everything around was in some kind of incomprehensible thicket. But there was a ceiling here which meant they were still inside, and this was part of the bunker. Mike looked with curiosity at the wonderful plants that he had never seen before. Out of curiosity, the boy lightly rubbed the branch of one of the plants with his finger, but the plant instantly reacted and released a strange green dust into Mike's face. It's good that the team hurried the boy and he quickly ran away, never seeing what a terrible secret this plant holds. Further along the way, everyone looked at the area, while the blogger carefully filmed and recorded everything on his phone. The team was busy looking for a way out, not even suspecting what horror was lurking nearby. Samson shared what was happening with the viewers while recording, describing their exit from the bunker into some scary garden. He also assured his subscribers of the complete authenticity of all this, and called them to watch his videos to the end to see how they would get out, after which the star and glasses stopped the recording and saved it on his phone until better times. Now that he didn't have to pretend to be a hero on camera, the blogger began to get nervous that they had fallen into some kind of hole again. Lana looked around the area carefully and decided that it was better to get out of here as quickly as possible. She was interrupted by Kim, who kindly handed the girl his blue handkerchief. The young man decided to take advantage of the moment and introduce himself, so he began to give out almost his entire biography. He was a big fan of Lana because, like many others, he only judged her appearance. The beauty noticed a scratch on her hand and understood why Kim was giving her a handkerchief. The guy decided to explain his chivalrous manners by saying that a scarf can sometimes be more useful than ever, which is why he wears it. But Lana didn't really want to listen to his reasons, so she used the handkerchief and briefly threw it back to Kim. She was indifferent and cold to this kind of flattery. Apparently, there were reasons for that. But Kim was proud of his deed, so he decided to immediately brag to Mike. He assured that just a little bit more and Lana would jump on his neck because he did everything for this. Mike did not understand what he was talking about. The blonde explained that it was all about his kind gesture. After all, when the beauty got hurt, he immediately handed her his handkerchief, hoping that his care would be appreciated. The kid was surprised that his friend was carrying this scarf, but Kim himself didn't see anything strange in it. After all, girls, in his opinion, appreciate such little things. Kim told his little friend that Lana even blushed with surprise. Therefore, he is sure that there is sympathy between them and they will soon be together. Mike listened to his every word with his mouth open and admired. Anna heard out of the corner of her ear what was being discussed and was a little upset that the guy's attention was not focused on her. She wandered back and forth and suddenly came across huge thorny vines that were hiding something. The girl decided to call Samson to share her find. The team responded to her call and also came closer to take a look. Deep in the eerie thicket there was a door hidden. It could be just the one they needed. The blogger was very happy because he thought that this was the way out and that there were only a couple of branches on the way to it. Lana looked closely at the plants and said that they were completely covered in thorns. Because of this, everyone could get seriously hurt. Samson proudly declared that he had served in the army and had seen worse things, so the wounds from the thorns were no obstacle. But Hal suggested going in search of a weapon with which one could easily and without risks deal with the thorns. The star in glasses didn't even listen to him. He turned on the recording and told the guys on camera to climb through the weeds. Kim, as always, pushed the responsibility for doing something important onto little Mike, explaining that he was small and nimble. They always treated him disrespectfully and took advantage of his kindness. Mike really wanted to help the team, so he rushed to break the thorny branches with his bare hands. While the baby was trying hard to do something, accusations of clumsiness and uselessness were flying at his back. Samson didn't stand on ceremony with his choice of words on camera and maniacally exploited everyone to work while he was filming. Even Kim did not miss the opportunity to assert himself once again at Mike's expense. He accused the boy of being unable to cope with anything, of always feeling sorry for himself, and of behaving like a child. The boy's words hurt Mike as much as the sharp branches with thorns. Their words cut the poor fellow without a knife, because he always tried to be useful, and now he was forced to listen to these groundless insults. Kim was trying to present himself to Lana in this way so that she would appreciate him as best as possible. But the girl didn't care at all about this behavior. Due to such an emotional crush, the baby lost his balance, stumbled and fell right into the epicenter of the thorny vines. Mike's arm was badly injured and trapped by thorns. The boy began to scream loudly from such unbearable pain. The guys ran to him with condemnation for another clumsy prank, and only Lana was worried about his well-being. Samson saw this as a good opportunity to show off on camera, so he ordered everyone to step aside and handed Kim the phone to film. He wanted to heroically get Mike out of the trap, so he kept asking Kim if he looked good on camera. As soon as the filming began, Samson began to pull the boy's hand with all his might, calling it help. The blogger didn't care that Mike was in terrible pain, so he kept pulling. Samson was sweating from such efforts and could not understand why he could not get the boy out of the bushes. The whole thing is that the thorns on the vines had dug deep into Mike's arm, causing any movement to cause unbearable pain. He asked the blogger to stop and not torment him, but the star in glasses didn't even want to listen. It was important to him to finish what he started at any cost. He grabbed the boy's free hand again and, without a hint of pity or compassion, began to pull. This torture was ended by Hal, who intervened and chopped up the thorny plants with an axe, finally freeing Mike. The boy's hand finally came free, but it seemed that Samson was not particularly happy with this solution to the problem. Hal continued to tidy up the bushes, swinging the axe with all his might so that no one else would have to do it with their hands. The team watched the guy with interest. In just a few minutes, the path to the treasured door was clear, and Hal began to catch his breath for a minute. He looked back at the team and said that there were no more obstacles and they could move on. The boys were delighted with Hal and his actions, which are always opportune. Kim held his breath and filmed it all on his phone. The girls immediately approached him and began to praise him for his resourcefulness at the right time. Kim automatically said out loud that Hal was really cool, which offended our suspicious Samson. Therefore, the blogger snatched his phone from the blonde and began to insult him. Kim did not understand why they were treating him like this, but still did not answer and silently stomped to the door. Samson looked with incredible contempt at Hal, who had once again stolen his moment of glory and the admiration of the team. But since the way was clear, it was necessary to go further. The blogger was walking behind, so he took his phone to watch the last video again. He didn't want to lose the viewer's love, so he removed the part with Hal from the video, after which he began to snap at Mike, who could barely stand the pain in his arm, and told him to go faster. Even when the boy was not to blame for his deep wounds, the narcissistic star did not miss the opportunity to insult him and finish him off even more. His arm was really in a bad condition. It was throbbing and very painful. The kid, gritting his teeth, decided to go on so as not to lose his chance of salvation. Hal instantly became everyone's favorite. Everyone was amazed by his skills. And Samson was again left without attention and respect, alone with himself. This situation made him remember how life had been unfair to him since his youth. After all, his student years also caused him a lot of grief. It was there that he had to fight for a place in the sun by any means necessary. Samson used to be part of a conference class where there were often many important tasks, such as collecting questionnaires from first-year students. And of course, there was a boss there who dictated his own rules and didn't like it when he was contradicted. He especially didn't like tolerating being late. That day, Samson was late, but without losing his optimism, he flew into the conference room and joyfully greeted everyone. The head student started yelling at him for being late, but the guy handed him a bag that could not leave anyone indifferent, especially hungry students. The mischievous boy with glasses had a full bag of different goodies that he bought especially. Everyone was already impatient to try the sweets, but Samson continued to speak. He said that on the way to class, he met a teacher and agreed to cover everyone's expenses for lunch today. His flattery stunned even the boss, because every student loves to eat well and save a little money. He patted Samson on the head and said that he was forgiven for being late today. The whole attention of the class was on this suck-up, and he didn't need anything else. Everyone ate sweets, made fun of Samson, and laughed at him openly. But the guy felt needed and important at these moments, so he was only happy about this attitude. He had an unremarkable appearance, short, thin, and wearing glasses. He was also not distinguished by his mental abilities, so he convinced himself that he was not special. He certainly wanted to be popular like many of his attractive peers. But Samson was a realist. He understood that high school was also a kind of jungle that needed to be conquered. He wanted all the attention and popularity for himself. So he decided to go against the system and achieve what he wanted through hard work. He had to face his shortcomings and discover his strengths. Samson learned to speak to find his place in the jungle. He made many mistakes, but after a while, he finally achieved a good result. Within a year, everyone had gotten used to him and could no longer imagine class meetings without the talkative Samson. And the boy himself was proud of himself, although he still bribed everyone with sweets and flattery. But it seemed that this was his strategy. All young men dream of first love, or at least mutual sympathy. Samson was no exception. There was a girl who captured his heart. She loved ice cream and laughing more than anyone else. Samson always looked at her from afar because he did not believe in himself and his chances. But this girl caught all the timid glances of the guy in glasses and responded to them sweetly with a smile. Samson's life was like paradise until one day when he was recruiting for a new class. Everything changed. The committee's reaction was mixed when the next candidate entered the class. It was Hal, a handsome 17-year-old boy with big eyes. Samson immediately began to feel awkward against his background. So to speak, he sensed a competitor in advance. He turned to the others to consult about the questions to ask the new boy for selection. At that moment, he realized that the new boy had stolen the affection of everyone in the class by his very presence, and also realized that life was unfair. The selection was over, and the students on the selection committee breathed a sigh of relief, because there were quite a lot of candidates. Only 5 people were chosen from all of them. Their personal files lay on the table and waited for their time. The club's leader asked Samson to teach Hal how to handle the equipment, but the boy was not very eager. After all, Hal didn't understand technology. He was hired only because of his appearance and charisma. The newcomer literally won the hearts of the commission from the very first seconds. They did not want to let him go and give him to another club. Only Samson silently watched and did not comment. He found it difficult to understand how Hal had managed to gain favor so quickly and easily. The students watched his every action with open mouths and always supported him. He was saying something absurd and ridiculous, but everyone liked it. The whole class was laughing, only Samson wasn't laughing. The young man with glasses finally took it upon himself to teach Hal how to use the equipment. But things were going slowly. Even when a newbie was clearly screwing up, he was always encouraged and not left without attention. Samson couldn't get his head around all this, because he had been trying to win the class's favor for a whole year, through persistent flattery and hard work. And Hal, without any extra effort, was able to gain universal love and recognition. At first, the boy with glasses decided not to dwell on this and to believe in the best, harboring hope for success. He still enthusiastically brought snacks to everyone and tried to be positive. But everything collapsed one day. It all came crashing down when he came to class meetings and found Hal kissing a girl he really liked. It was as if he had taken all of Samson's life away with that one kiss. But at the same time, he pretended that nothing terrible had happened. The guy in glasses literally boiled with anger. He accused the newcomer of violating the club rules prohibiting relationships. He screamed and could not calm down. Hal only tried to explain the situation in bewilderment, but he did not listen to him. Even that girl admitted that this gesture was her initiative and Hal was not to blame. This information made Samson feel even worse because no one would come up to him of their own free will to kiss him, and not a newcomer like that right away. The situation was very unpleasant. Samson, full of hatred, hurried to leave the class. He immediately joined another club, no longer wanting to compete with the handsome newcomer who had destroyed his world. Samson realized that day that he was not Hal's equal, but this truth gave him impetus to new aspirations. He decided to change his image and find his success on social networks, find his audience. Having an insatiable thirst to prove his importance to everyone, Samson took action. He had a goal, and he walked towards it proudly, to show everyone how high he could fly. And so the young blogger's pressure did not remain in the shadows. People noticed him and eagerly watched the new things on his channel. Subscriptions and likes on VTube were increasing every day. The popularity of the ordinary guy in glasses was growing. He promoted himself by helping other famous VTubers when they needed a fresh perspective. Everyone knew him as a responsible and capable person, so they were willing to make contact. Hal didn't want to communicate with him after the kissing incident, so he didn't make contact. And Samson, in turn, was fixated on himself and the desire to prove his importance to the whole world. Even in a situation on an island where life is important, he is like a madman trying to gain recognition at any cost. The team had been wandering around the new area for a long time, and Kim could no longer contain his indignation at the fact that they still had not found a way out. Hal pointed out that there were electrical wires visible at the top, which was already a good clue. After all, if you follow her, you can find a way out, which is what he actually suggested the guys do. Samson perceived his every word or action as a challenge, because once again, he had to share attention. Anna asked how Hal knew this, but the guy calmly replied that he worked part-time in the fire service. The girl was overjoyed that they had such a reliable person on their team. Meanwhile, the blogger was getting angrier. He decided to steal the blanket of attention and recognition in order to be needed again. Samson turned on the camera and began to monologue with the audience, which attracted the attention of the team. He turned on his charisma and activity, inviting the guys to say hello to the audience. The VTube star spoke on camera about the circumstances that befell them on the way and about how they still had not found a way out of the garden. He also emphasized that all the guys were very tired from these incredible adventures. Samson decided to give the floor to each member of the team for an interview and chose Kim first. The blonde got into character and sincerely praised the place they were in, despite the fact that it was creepy. Then little Mike got into the frame. Samson didn't miss the opportunity to mock his wounds. Kim wanted to have a positive role in the frame, so he kindly offered the boy his handkerchief so that he could wipe his wounds. The blonde was clearly overacting with his care. Mike felt it, so he felt uncomfortable. Samson went with the camera to Lana, asking about her health and impressions. The girl sheepishly joked that her mood was quite positive, because she was surrounded by responsible and reliable men. Anna decided to intervene and asked if the beauty was not ashamed to think about men in the conditions of survival. Lana decided not to give in to the provocation and simply responded with laughter for the sake of correctness. But Anna didn't understand the hints, so she continued to pester her with uncomfortable questions. She asked Lana if she paid attention to a man's body when she met him. Anna left Hal as an example. She emphasized that Lana might be partial to him. The beauty smiled back at her and said that for such an innocent appearance, she was too cunning. Lana explained that in survival situations, one should not use psychological manipulation on people for one's own benefit, because it can backfire. Anna realized that she had been found out and began to back down, citing the fact that she did not understand what kind of manipulations were being discussed, after which the girl resorted to an emotional trick. She began to press on pity and apologize for her desire to make friends. Anna even started to cry bitterly on camera so that she would not be perceived as a real threat, but rather pitied. Samson encouraged her and said that he would always be her protector. Kim continued to show off on camera and praised the blogger for his gentlemanly manners. Samson ended the video with a smile and a request to subscribe to his content to always stay up to date. With one click, the video stopped. Instantly, the need to pretend for the sake of content disappeared, and everyone returned to real events. Samson embraced Anna, who was bursting into tears, and led everyone on. He turned to the others and said that standing still could be dangerous and they should hurry. Who couldn't wait to find out how he came out on video, whether he played the role well. The blogger assured the guy that everything was fine. Hal understood perfectly well that all this fuss on camera was specially done to distract everyone from him. Lana was calmly following everyone, when suddenly a blonde man approached her, worried about her well-being. The girl coldly replied that everything was fine with her, because she was not used to playing such childish games. The guy persistently continued the conversation with her, asking about her age. Lana also calmly answered that she was 25 years old. Kim was pleasantly surprised that the beauty was 2 years younger than him, and decided that this would be his advantage. He was constantly raving about meeting her and said that he had been following her social media for a long time, but the girl didn't listen to him much. She was worried about little Mike, who was barely holding back the pain in his arm. Lana noticed that the boy had become too pale, so she asked how he was feeling now and whether he needed help. Mike modestly declined and assured that everything was fine. Kim unceremoniously interrupted their conversation, joked about Mike's poor health, and said that in the army he received much worse injuries. Lana did not react to the arrogant guy and continued to talk to Mike. She was concerned about his wounds, so she asked him not to be embarrassed and not to tolerate it if it hurt. Kim was taken aback by such disregard towards him and by the fact that all the girls' attention fell on Mike. The kid understood that something was about to happen, so he blushed with fear. The blonde took his handkerchief away from him with screams, because he didn't want to share the beauty's attention with anyone. Samson interrupted them. He ordered the whole team to come to him immediately. The guys who were busy with their own affairs immediately came closer to understand what was going on. In front of them was an artificial reservoir with a bridge along it. On the other side of the bridge was a door. Perhaps this was the long-awaited exit that they had been so diligently searching for all this time. Kim, overjoyed, was ready to run straight there without looking back, because he was already tired of wandering around the labyrinths. Hal stopped him, pointing his axe upward where the danger lurked. Raising his head up, the blonde realized that there was a bunch of dangerous flying dinosaurs hanging from the ceiling. They are still sleeping, so they do not pose a threat, but any careless noise can wake them up and make them angry. The team tried to figure out what kind of creatures these were, because they clearly didn't look like bats. Samson didn't care what it was, because while they were sleeping, they weren't dangerous. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he, of course, filmed everything. Kim panicked that they wouldn't be able to get through, while Anna was scared by the wings of these creatures, because if they fly, they could quickly catch them. Lana also spoke out. She did not think it was wise to go across this bridge and suggested finding a safer route. Samson stubbornly insisted that the exit was right in front of them, and if they did not want to go, then he would go himself. The blogger handed the camera to Kim and said that he would go first so that the guy could record everything. He turned to the boys and said that if he managed to cross safely, they could follow him too. The team was stunned by Samson's decision, because this act, although brave, could put everyone at risk. The blogger didn't care about the consequences, because here and now he wanted to prove his courage to everyone. It had been very important to him to seem better than Hal since his student years, and now he had the opportunity to prove it. Samson took a deep breath, grabbed the handrails with his hands, and began to motivate himself to do it. The VTube star had never been so scared. His legs didn't even want to go, but there is no way back. He cannot return after such a speech and renounce everything. After all, everyone is looking at him and believing that he will succeed. So he gathered his thoughts, put aside his fear, and decided to go. As soon as Samson stepped onto the bridge, its fastenings began to creak terribly, and the bolts began to fall out. This unpleasant sound woke up the monsters above, who had been sleeping until then, and now the situation promises to be unpredictable. The guys watched the blogger with bated breath, worried about him and filming everything on camera. And after some time, Samson finally managed to cross the bridge and find himself at the exit. In order not to make unnecessary sounds, he waved his hand, calling on the team to follow. The boys looked at each other and realized that they would also have to go, no matter how scary it was. They grouped together and still went one after another to cross this bridge. They were haunted by the monsters above their heads, who were hanging out there in a crowd. Suddenly, Anna, who was walking ahead, stopped. Kim decided to ask what the reason was. The girl was dumbfounded with horror and barely managed to squeeze out of herself that there was a monster ahead. The terrifying creature came very close to Anna. The girl even began to sweat from excitement. But to her great surprise, the monster passed by her as if he had not seen her. It seems that these dinosaurs didn't see anything. They only reacted to sounds, so they didn't touch the guys. Kim immediately understood this peculiarity of theirs, so he carefully sat down and took a stone lying nearby. The guy threw it into the water to distract the monster's attention to the noise somewhere as far away from them as possible. It worked. The dinosaur immediately turned in the direction where the stone fell. At that moment, the whole team realized that these creatures are blind, but have good hearing. Although they managed to avoid the attacks of the monsters, it was still difficult to think through their next steps. The boys' thoughts were interrupted by Hal, who told them to move away because he had thought of something. The guy didn't want to waste time waiting and decided to deal with the monster while he didn't suspect anything. He saw this as a way out of the situation and the salvation of the team, so he swung with all his might, fully prepared to attack. But Hal was suddenly stopped by Lana, who silently and reproachfully placed her hand on his shoulder. The beauty explained her actions by saying that if you kill one, the rest will immediately come, and there are quite a few of them. Kim supported Lana. He suggested that instead of killing the monster, they simply distract it with false leads, throwing stones into the water. The blonde man took a stance to throw a stone, and suddenly the bridge under his feet began to make dangerous sounds that did not inspire anything good. The bolts on the bridge fastenings broke, and one side of the bridge, on which the boys were standing, fell into the water with a crash. It became clear to everyone that the bridge was about to collapse, so they were determined to cross it as quickly as possible. The monsters reacted instantly to this roar. They flew towards the bridge from all sides. Kim began to panic as their numbers in the vicinity grew at such a rapid rate. But the team decided not to panic ahead of time and still try to cross this bridge quietly and quickly. The boys began to slowly move forward, and Mike's hand was pulsating suspiciously, as if reacting to the dinosaurs. The monsters passed by everyone without a reaction, but it was the boys' hand that caught their attention, and they greedily pounced on it. The team was confident that these creatures would not touch them, so the fact that they attacked Mike was a shock to them. The winged killers surrounded the boy and began to attack him mercilessly while he panicked and begged for salvation. The dinosaurs flew with increased activity to feast on the tempting flesh, not seeing anyone else on their way. There were so many of them, as if a whole flock had woken up from sleep for such an event. Hal, in order to save everyone, hit the shaky bridge with an axe with all his might. As soon as he did this, the bridge began to go underwater, and the dinosaurs finally left Mike alone. The guys, of course, all ended up underwater, but it was a necessary measure for salvation, because these monsters won't go into the water. Opening his eyes in the water, Kim saw a terrifying picture. At the bottom, strangely shaped tree roots were visible. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that these roots were formed from human bodies. Hal pulled the blonde out of the water by his t-shirt because he had been there too long. As soon as Kim took a breath of air, he began to talk about what he saw at the bottom. Human bodies. More precisely, he said that he saw corpses of people. The guys listened to the guy with horror in their eyes and could not believe all this. Hal tried to calm him down and keep him busy. He told the boy to hold the bridge so he wouldn't drown and to drive away bad thoughts. Hal said that underwater, stress could cause even worse things. But now that they were in shelter, there was nothing to be afraid of. Lana got nervous because little Mike never emerged from under the water. She asked to find him and save him. Hal immediately dived under the water so as not to waste time, because the boy's life could depend on it. When he was underwater, he also saw the bodies that Kim was talking about. These remains of people were pulling Mike towards them. It was like some kind of zombie apocalypse in the fast period. Hal immediately grabbed an axe and began to beat the boy out of the clutches of these creatures who were desperately trying to devour him. But no matter how hard Hal tried, the baby was already almost swallowed. The hands of these bodies intertwined and did not let go of him. When the guy started to pull Mike out, the arms started to swallow him too, so he had to break them with an axe to survive. Due to prolonged stay underwater, oxygen supplies ran out and consciousness began to fail. The guys have already started to worry about the boys because they haven't been seen for a long time. Quite a long time has passed since Hal dived. The human body is not capable of withstanding such a long period of time underwater. But just as they were starting to worry about it, Hal emerged from the water with Mike in his arms. Lana was very happy that the boys were alive and that they managed to return. The girl asked about the boys' well-being. Since Mike was not conscious, Hal answered for him, saying that everything was more or less okay. The team was under the bridge and also in the water, so the flying monsters could not reach them. Hal said that this was a good opportunity to get to the exit under the bridge, but one should behave as quietly as possible. Suddenly, Anna refused to go further. The guy did not understand why he was backing down now, so he looked at her in surprise, waiting for an explanation. The girl justified this by saying that Kim had previously spoken about corpses in the water. Therefore, she was very afraid to go further, knowing about such a danger at the bottom. Hal thought. He understood that if he told the truth about the aquatic inhabitants, the situation would worsen into panic. That's why the guy lied that when he dived for Mike, he didn't see anything like that underwater. His words calmed the team and, holding the bridge over their heads, they moved towards the exit. On the other side, Samson was already waiting for them impatiently. Hal handed Mike to him and asked him to hold him very carefully. The monsters were blindly circling above the original site of the bridge collapse, looking for food. Taking advantage of the fact that these creatures had not yet noticed them, the boys hurried to get out with all their might. Samson was very worried that everyone would have time to get out of the water before they were noticed, so he hurried the team. When everyone was at the door, the blogger began to open it. but it was tightly locked and did not yield to his efforts. Kim immediately rushed to help Samson. Now they both leaned on this door in the hope of salvation. While they were struggling with the door mechanism, the flying monsters sensed their movements and began to change their flight angle. At this point, the teams inside sank. Kim began to scream in panic, and Samson continued to try to save himself. Thanks to his persistence, the door finally gave way and the boys immediately ran outside. Hal pulled little Mike to safety and quickly rushed to close the door so that the whole pack of those dinosaurs wouldn't get in. When it was all over, they moved away to examine the place they had escaped from. It was a huge dome, like a zoo for birds. Only here the birds were very dangerous. Suddenly, Kim frantically remembered that Samson had previously given him his phone for filming. He was worried because of all these events, the phone fell into water, and now it was unclear whether it would work at all. The blogger, seeing his phone in such a state, began to yell at the blonde, because the videos on it were more valuable to him than the lives of any of them. Besides, it was the best model of the gadget he had ever had. Samson began to try to turn it on with trepidation. The phone did not disappoint its owner, because even after everything he had been through, it turned on instantly. Samson was delighted like a child about the waterproof protection of his phone, and Kim breathed a sigh of relief. The blogger was sure that luck was on his side and began to check the functionality of the phone to make sure it worked. Anna supported the VTube star with a joke that the phone could have killed Kim if something had happened to him. Samson did not deny it. While everyone was happy about the content saved on the blogger's phone, Lana was concerned about more important things. She looked with longing at how Hal was looking after Mike, who was in very bad condition. The blogger was happy that they finally got out, so he urged the guys to move towards the shore. However, his enthusiasm was curtailed by Hal, who was not willing to go further due to certain circumstances. He was worried about Mike's condition because he was feeling very bad now. The boy had deep wounds, severe exhaustion, and a high temperature. In order to move on, he needed first aid and rest. Anna couldn't believe that one of the team members was unconscious, so she started asking a lot of questions about what should be done first. Samson intervened. He claimed that there was no time for rest and other nonsense. The blogger referred to the fact that it was already 6 in the evening and it would soon start getting dark on the island. He noticed that they were just a bunch of people, and there were dangerous monsters roaming around that looked like dinosaurs. Samson insisted that the first thing to do was to get to the shore as quickly as possible. Hal couldn't listen to this nonsense any longer, so he asked the VTube star directly if he would be ready to take responsibility for the boy's death. Samson coldly made it clear that Mike's life meant nothing to him, after which the blogger unceremoniously, and for some unknown reason, punched Hal in the face. He said that the guy had not been a rescuer for a long time, since he had quit the fire service. Samson continued to belittle and bully Hal for wanting to help Mike. The blogger knew how important his service in the fire department was to him, so he skillfully pressed on the guy's wounds with memories of missed opportunities. While Samson was shouting that he needed to be listened to here and was swinging his arm for another round of slaps, Hal stopped his hand. The guy, with complete contempt in his eyes, ordered Samson to immediately shut up and stop talking nonsense. This reaction slightly discouraged the blogger. He did not expect that he would be rebuffed. While Samson was yelling at him and demanding that he let go of his hand, Hal's nerves were slowly giving way. The star in glasses got angry and, in order not to feel trapped, decided to attack first, so he swung with all his might. But this upstart forgot who he was dealing with. Hal was taller and stronger than him, so it was nothing for him to simply push Samson away. The blogger flew a decent distance and fell to the ground like a helpless chicken. Hal was ready to teach this impudent fellow some manners, but Lana intervened. She told them to stop fighting immediately. The girl explained that now was not the place or time to sort things out between them. After all, this time could be spent on more important things, like helping Mike. Lana understood that while everyone was arguing, Mike needed support and attention. Without it, he would not survive. Hal listened to her and went to the boy, but Samson could not accept the defeat and demanded that the fight continue. Lana looked at the blogger with disapproval and told him to pull himself together, because there was little time left before sunset. Samson still could not cool down. He threatened Hal with reprisals upon his return. The blogger was throwing insults at the guy from behind, because his pride and authority were hurt. Samson ridiculed Hal's desire to help people, citing the fact that he couldn't even pay his mother's hospital bills. Lana interrupted this stream of insults. She said that now the priority is helping Mike. But suddenly the girl's good intentions were refuted by Anna, who told her not to rush to set priorities. Anna took Samson's side, She didn't want to focus on the boy, but rather to get to the shore as quickly as possible before it got dark. Lana was surprised and angered by this attitude towards a team member, because Mike is in serious condition, and they seem to not care. Anna continued to convince her that sacrificing the lives of everyone for the sake of one was very stupid. The beauty asked Anna directly if she wanted to leave the boy alone in the forest, but she assured him that she had no such intentions, dodging the question. The girls started to argue very loudly about this topic, because Lana was infuriated by Anna's blatant sycophancy towards the blogger. Kim watched the ladies quarrel nervously and tried to put in a word to calm them down, but in vain. So Samson silenced everyone. The blogger came to his senses after the fight, and having soberly assessed the situation, suggested giving Mike first aid, and then going in search of a safe place to spend the night. The sun was already setting. It was getting dark in the forest, so it was necessary to calculate the time for everything wisely. Samson ordered the boy's wounds to be bandaged and to go in search of a place to spend the night somewhere near the shore. He turned to Kim and told him to get ready, because he would be the one dragging Mike. The blonde wasn't too happy about this turn of events, but he didn't argue. Without a moment's hesitation, Lana began to tear her t-shirt into small pieces. After all, it is known that the inside of a t-shirt or vest is best suited for dressing wounds in emergency cases, namely when there are no sterile bandages at hand. Having somehow treated the wounds and thrown the boy on the shoulder of a not very loyal comrade, the team prepared to move on. After a quarrel with a blogger, Hal stayed away. The girls were worried about his future fate away from everyone, but Samson told them not to pay attention to him. Lana felt sorry for the guy, but she couldn't influence his decision to distance himself from everyone. And the blogger said that Hal is a strong guy, so he will survive on his own. Samson, together with the girls and a flashlight, was enthusiastically looking for a place to spend the night, while Kim had already fallen behind them quite a bit. The blonde guy wasn't fit enough to carry Mike for so long. He asked the guys to wait for him, because it was hard for him to keep up with them. Samson ignored the boys' requests to wait, citing the fact that it was already dark in the forest and he needed to hurry. Kim blamed Mike for all his troubles, as if he wanted to be unconscious. The guy shouted after the blogger that he wanted to rest for at least 5 minutes, but the guys had already moved far away. Since no one heard him, Kim started shouting and speeding up, which is why he didn't notice the stone under his feet and tripped. He couldn't leave Mike alone, so he desperately shouted for Samson and the girls to wait for him. But suddenly, Kim realized that he had fallen very far behind and was basically left completely alone in this terrible place. Realizing his situation, the young man became very upset and began to think about how to catch up with Samson and the girls. Lana asked the blogger to slow down a little and wait for Kim. Samson rejected her request, because it was completely dark in the forest, and he did not want to waste time. The beauty still insisted on waiting, because Kim was no longer even visible in the thick forest. Meanwhile, the blonde ran with the boy on his shoulders to the crossroads, and could not choose a direction. The guy turned at random and walked through the forest, shouting at the top of his lungs so that Samson and the girls could hear him and respond. The blogger heard the guy scream and started screaming back to at least somehow understand where he was. Samson and the girls shone a flashlight through the bushes in search of the guy and continued to shout for him to follow the voice. Kim tried to get to the team as quickly as possible, so without looking at his feet, he walked towards the blogger's voice. This led to the blonde not noticing a huge hole under his feet in the darkness, so he stumbled and fell right into it. The guy was already tired of constantly falling and stumbling, so while he was flying down, he scolded himself for being careless. Finding himself at the bottom of the pit, Kim opened his eyes and saw someone's skull right in front of him. But raising his head higher, he discovered that he had fallen into a pit with the remains of human bodies, of which there were a lot. It looked like a warehouse for someone's food supplies because the bodies were half bitten. And looking around, the guy saw the owner of this collection. In the distance, a hole was visible from which someone's unkind red eyes were staring at Kim. The monster crawled out of its lair to greet the guest, or rather fresh meat. Kim was terrified and tried with all his might to crawl out of the hole to save himself. The monster was serious, so the guy had to get out of there as soon as possible. Kim was trying his best to get out, despite his fatigue. Suddenly, he saw someone's silhouette above his head. It was Hal, who had been watching the boys all this time, in order to save them if necessary. He was in the right place at the right time, because just when Kim was about to be attacked by a dinosaur, Hal slammed an axe into the monster's head with all his might. The hungry, aggressive creature was neutralized, and now it was possible to safely get out of the pit. Samson and the girls continued searching for the missing part of the team. He shone a flashlight into the distance and shouted, hoping to help the guys in this way. The guys suddenly came out of the bushes. Kim immediately started telling how he barely escaped. Samson was certainly glad to see them, but Hal's presence clearly did not make him happy. Therefore, the blogger, with great displeasure, directly asked the blonde why Hal was with him. Kim began to tell in detail about the situation that happened to him. He mentioned a mountain of corpses and said that he remained alive only thanks to Hal. Upon hearing about the corpses, the girls immediately began to panic and ask a bunch of clarifying questions. Samson didn't listen to the blonde. He was more interested in why Hal decided to return to them. The blogger decided that his competitor returned because he felt lonely. But Kim continued to praise the guy for his bravery and help at the right time, which again hooked Samson. For the blogger, praise that wasn't intended for him personally was like a red rag to a bull. So he immediately devalued Hal's help, citing the fact that he could have helped Kim too. Samson even began to blame the blonde himself for not following him and getting into a situation from which he needed to be saved. Realizing that the blogger's sick nature could not be defeated, Hal decided to make concessions. He simply bowed silently. The guy needed to take care of his mother upon his return, plus Mike needed him. So the guy swallowed his pride and apologized to Samson for all their disagreements. The girls didn't expect this turn of events, so they just silently watched as Hal asked for forgiveness for essentially nothing. The arrogant blogger, feeling power in his hands, began to humiliate the guy for his first steps towards reconciliation. Hal knew that this would happen, so he patiently continued to bow and ask for forgiveness. Samson called him pitiful and scornfully lectured him on proper behavior. Having had his fill of a minute of fame, the blogger nevertheless praised Hal for settling down in time and realizing who was in charge. Samson came closer to him and added that despite universal love and recognition, Hal still would not become an ideal and a leader. After all, it is unrealistic to save yourself alone, so you should stick to one leader and not rise up against him. Otherwise, according to the blogger, the rebel will be abandoned to his fate. Samson also added that life forced him to show his pride in public in order to survive. He just forgot to clarify that he does this for self-affirmation and because of a bunch of far-fetched complexes. Having said everything that had accumulated, Samson briefly and in a commanding tone ordered everyone to continue searching for shelter. Anna was worried about having to walk through the forest in the dark. In response, the blogger only urged them on, since it really is unsafe to linger in this dangerous place. In addition, they have a wounded Mike on their hands, who needs rest and proper care. Along the way, Kim noticed a light in the bushes and notified the team about it so they could check it out together. The boys grouped together and carefully approached the light source to examine everything unnoticed. They saw generators and a small tower, which were illuminated by a bright lantern. Kim concluded that since the electricity was working, there might be people here. Samson agreed with his conclusions and suggested that they spend the night in this very room. He believed that it was safer inside than outside. Lana did not agree. The girl reminded him with what difficulty they all got out of that closed room. Besides, they have Mike, so the girl didn't want to risk his health. The beauty also recalled the piles of corpses where Kim had fallen. Who knows what kind of people might live here, and it's not a fact that they'll be glad to have guests. Having heard such an impressive list of facts, Samson froze for a moment. But after thinking a little, he still agreed to look for another place to spend the night, because he didn't really want to become food for dinosaurs. The guys decided everything for themselves and moved on, covering each other. After some time, they came across some holes in the roots of trees. Samson said that this was a good place to wait for dawn. The team was already completely tired, so no one argued. Everyone lay down on the ground with relief and tried to sleep. It was difficult to sleep in such conditions, because even in my sleep, I was tormented by nightmares. It was especially difficult for Kim, because he had that terrible pit with the bodies of people in front of his eyes. He woke up in a cold sweat from the terrifying picture that he had to experience in reality. He was haunted by the thought of those bodies. The guy wondered how they got there and why there were so many of them. Having recovered from the nightmare, Kim raised his head and saw Samson above him with a very serious expression on his face. The blonde assured the blogger that he needed to try to sleep to gain strength. But it seemed Samson had other plans. Meanwhile, the dinosaur in its lair, which Hal had killed with an axe, began to show signs of life. A moment later, the monster was already standing confidently on his feet, as if he had no wound and an axe was not sticking out of his head. The sight was truly frightening. Hal stood in the middle of the jungle with strange inhabitants and looked around, trying to be ready for any sudden dangers. Suddenly, he heard Mike's strange muttering and was surprised that the boy came to his senses so quickly. Mike lay with his back to the guy and continued to mumble something unintelligible under his breath. Hal reached out his hand to the boy to make sure he was okay. But as soon as the guy touched him, something huge and with signs of mutation crawled out of Mike. These were the remains of people who were intertwined into one single being, as then underwater. The mutant that Mike had turned into began to quickly absorb Hal without a chance of salvation. Anna saw that Hal was acting strangely and also screaming, so she called out to him to bring him back to reality. The guy woke up but still continued to wave his arms and scream from the horror of what he experienced in his dream. While he was slowly coming to his senses, Anna was shocked by such a performance. Hal finally calmed down, and looking around, he explained to the girl that he had seen a very scary dream and asked for forgiveness for screaming. Anna hesitantly informed the boys that Samson had gone in search of the missing Kim. Lana and Hal looked at the girl with bewilderment and tried to get into the mood to think after sleep. The guy asked what time it was, but the girls had no idea, since they had just woken up. Hal was sure that the stressful circumstances had hit each of them hard, so he didn't ask them any further. What interested them most was where Samson and Kim could have disappeared for so long, since it was now dark and unsafe to wander through the forest. Lana lightened the mood with black humor, suggesting that the guys had already been eaten by monsters. But no one appreciated the joke. There were no signs of resistance or carnage nearby, so their departure remained a mystery to the boys. While the three of them were struggling with their guesses, the conversation was suddenly interrupted by Mike, who claimed that Samson and Kim had gone shooting. The boy explained with his last strength that the two had decided to film some content for a vlog. Lana was glad that Mike had come to his senses and immediately began asking about his well-being. But Anna was more interested in where he got this information from and whether it was reliable at all. The boy explained that he suddenly woke up from their whispering behind his back, so he heard everything. He also said that about an hour had passed since then, and they still had not returned. Lana was furious at their actions. The girl could not even imagine where these two could go for the sake of content. She was indignant at such a careless attitude towards the team. After all, this prank could cost everyone their lives. Lana demanded that Hal take responsibility for this situation and help them get out of here. The beauty was on the verge of anger. She was even ready not to wait for Samson and Kim, but to just leave without them. She thought that if they didn't care about anyone, then why should everyone suffer? Anna did not agree with her, because she understood that Samson had all the valuable materials. But she did not voice this. She only expressed deep concern for the life of the blogger and the blonde. Lana called the girl narrow-minded, since she does not understand the horror of the situation in which they all found themselves precisely because of Samson and Kim. Anna continued to argue that you can't leave guys to their fate, despite their antics. Lana coldly replied that the contracts did not stipulate saving one's neighbor if he was crazy. It seemed like the girls were about to tear each other apart, so Hal stopped them. The guy volunteered to go look for Samson and Kim in order to return them to the team and all go to the ship together. Lana was unhappy with this decision because it meant that they would be left completely alone and without protection for some time. Plus, there was no guarantee that Hal would return from there alive. Hal confidently stated, without hiding his true purpose, that upon their return, they would receive the money only together with Samson. The beauty claimed that money was not so important when their lives were at stake, and they were already hanging by a thread. But the guy, with an unperturbed look, said that money was very important to him. Lana called him pathetic, because for the sake of money, he is ready to bend over backwards and sacrifice the lives of others. Hal was very angry at the beauty for labeling him like that without knowing his real motives. It was at the moment of the greatest tension that the prodigal boys appeared from the bushes. Kim and Samson looked at the boys with interest and tried to understand from afar why they were not sleeping but arguing. When the team finally reunited, there was an awkward and mysterious silence between them as they met. Everyone started asking the culprits of the panic where they had been all this time, because Hal almost went looking for them. Samson answered them smilingly that he had simply gone to the toilet and there was no reason to be hysterical. Lana immediately sensed the lie in his words, so she asked why they went to the toilet together. The blogger started to get nervous, but got out of it by citing the fear of being alone in such a terrible place. The beauty confidently stated that she could see through the lies. She also specified that Mike had heard their conversation and the agreement to quietly shoot a couple of monsters. Samson was unhappy with the presence of a witness to his cunning plans, so he began to think up on the fly how to beautifully get out of it and divert attention from himself. The blogger came up with a strategy and began to morally suppress the witness. He turned to the boy and asked if he could have misheard all this. Mike said uncertainly that although he was wounded, he still had it with him. Samson continued to argue that the boy could have mixed something up because of illness, because that happens. The blogger didn't even let the boy answer. He immediately began accusing him of lying, hallucinations, and lack of evidence. Even Lana believed Samson's words because there really was no evidence and he spoke very convincingly. The star of VTuber, in order not to fall flat on his face, ordered the boy to substantiate his accusations if he had anything to back them up with. Mike was very upset because he was literally made into some kind of moron because he told the truth. Samson also called the little finger pathetic, and Kim did not hesitate to ridicule him. The blonde tried to win Lana's favor with his provocative behavior. The girl didn't care about him, but the guy didn't stop. For better effect, Kim even blamed Mike for this situation. In the end, they turned the boy into a madman who alarmed everyone and created inconvenience. Mike no longer had the strength to tolerate these lies and groundless accusations, so he became seriously angry. In a fit of anger, the boy gained a lot of strength and instantly snatched the phone from Kim's hands. The blonde was in shock. Firstly, he didn't expect that Mike was capable of such a bold act. And secondly, he was a little tense about being exposed. Kim threatened the boy with violence and ordered him to return the phone to him immediately. Mike's eyes were filled with anger and resentment, so he demanded an apology for all the insults he had heard during their stay on the island. The boy, in a fit of emotion, very confidently stated that Kim had not taken out his phone before because of some malfunction. He was sure of what he had heard and demanded that he not be made out to be mentally retarded. Mike reached out his hand to the nearest large rock nearby and continued to demand an apology from Kim. In case of refusal, he threatened to break the phone with a stone without a shred of regret. Samson told Mike to break the phone if he was sure of his words and did not want to check the gallery for video files with evidence. The boy fell for this trick and immediately began checking the phone archives. The blogger put moral pressure on him, claiming that this mistake would cost him dearly. Mike answered nervously that the truth would come out right now and it would become clear whether he was wrong or not. The boy turned on the first video in the gallery. Samson's voice and the standard greeting for his audience were heard there. The boys listened intently to understand the essence of this video, but this was one of Samson's provocative videos on VTube for hype. The topic of this video was far from what Mike was looking for. The boy was surprised that the shooting video was not in the recent ones, so he decided to dig deeper. He checked literally every folder and archive on his phone, but could not find any evidence. Mike continued to search frantically, but his face showed that there was nothing there. Samson, as an experienced manipulator, caught the moment and took advantage of the boy's confusion. The blogger confidently stated that a mistake had been made in his address after all. Kim completely lost control of his anger and started kicking Mike for allegedly making false accusations. Lana stopped the aggressive blonde, demanding respect for her team members. Kim only told her where to go with her respect. Even after being beaten, the boy still tried to understand how he got into such a situation. Because he was ready to swear on his own mother that he heard a conversation about shooting and content. Kim was furious that Mike couldn't just stop talking about this uncomfortable topic. He even threatened to kill the boy if he didn't shut up. Samson ordered everyone to be quiet and to return the phone to him for safekeeping. The blonde walked up to the boy and roughly snatched the phone out of his hands. The blogger began to reinforce his publicity game with pompous statements about how he was always taking care of Mike and his well-being. While Lana was raising him from the ground, Samson expressed disappointment in his speeches. The VTuber star said with contempt that he did not deserve such treatment and in addition, cursed the boy for his accusations. Mike was depressed because he was actually made to look crazy and publicly shamed for wanting to prove the truth. Samson finally finished his performance and ordered everyone to sleep, so that at dawn they would have the opportunity and strength to move on. When the guys stepped aside, they immediately started whispering, discussing how they had just almost gotten caught. After all, Kim had deliberately hidden the file earlier, just in case. Samson asked the blonde if he had filmed everything on their secret expedition. He replied that he had tried not to miss anything. Kim still could not believe the reality of what they saw and did in that place. The blogger didn't care, because he knew that thanks to this video, they could earn unimaginable amounts of money. At last the morning came, and the team, with half-open eyes, set off for the shore through the thicket of the forest. After such adventures, it was very pleasant and joyful to finally see the sea. Samson shouted at the top of his lungs that he was free, but Kim wearily flopped down to rest on the shore. The blogger noted that there was still time before the ship arrived, thanks to the fact that they had set off early in the morning. Anna interrupted him, hinting that she would like to return for their things, because there were a lot of her cosmetics and expensive personal items there. The girl justified this by saying that the things were not that far from the shore. Samson immediately and sharply refused her, because the idea did not seem good to him. The reason was trivially simple, because in all the films, the heroes who returned for something were always attacked. Having experienced so much in this place, he did not want to be exposed to danger again. Therefore, the star of Vituba ordered everyone to sit quietly on the beach and wait for the ship. Samson thought that things were nothing compared to the fact that they would finally get out of here and stay alive. No one argued. The mere thought of freedom made the blogger happy to the depths of his soul. That's why he shouted to the entire shore that he would never die in this hole. Mike did not share Samson's joy. He just sat silently on the squeak, not wanting to get into trouble again. Lana was worried about the boy's condition, so she approached him to ask if everything was okay. Mike immediately began to apologize to her for yesterday's incident and for the fact that by arguing with Samson, he had spoiled the atmosphere in the team. The beauty said that she considers the blogger to be narrow-minded and tolerates his character only because of the money, like everyone else here. Looking at him and Anna showing off in front of the camera, the girl said that all this would soon end. You just need to get out of here. Lana decided not to discuss these unpleasant people for long and asked Mike what condition his hand was in. To make sure he was okay, the girl asked to see the wound. But even through the bandages, it was clear that everything was very sad. Mike said that his arm was constantly throbbing, but he was somehow not used to putting his discomfort first, or even just talking about it. The boy said optimistically that in any case he would soon leave this place, and upon arrival home he would definitely go to the hospital. Kim intervened in their conversation. He told Mike not to complain about his health because he had done a lot for him. After the reproaches, the blonde began to be nice to Lana. He invited her to go somewhere to celebrate her return. Anna heard this and shouted that she also wanted to go celebrate with them. She and Kim were already dreaming of drinking beer with the whole team. The girl asked Samson if he would like to join them upon his return. He was happy to support their idea, since they had already been through so much and experienced so much together. The blogger said that the entire banquet would be at his expense, even the alcohol and beef, which the guys loved so much. Samson enthusiastically declared that he would eat all the best food in the restaurants out of joy in order to properly celebrate such an event. Hal didn't really share this idea, and in general, after all this torment, he didn't want to celebrate, but rather to quickly forget everything. The blogger approached him and said that the guy had been acting provocative the whole way, and when it came to the end, he had become guiltily silent. Samson, feeling like the king of the situation, told Hal that his heroism was of no use to anyone, because he was not the main one here. The VTube star did not stop. He shamed the guy for all his initiatives and promised to monitor his behavior so that this would not happen again. After 5 minutes of showing off, the blogger asked Hal with a grin how he was feeling. He quietly replied that everything was fine and he understood everything. In order to confirm his importance in this team, Samson hit the guy in the chest and told him to make his face simpler, because success awaits them upon their return. The long-awaited ship appeared in the distance, and Anna immediately informed the children about it. Kim and Samson were very happy when they saw the ship, because it was so difficult and scary in this place. Lana and Mike looked at the ship with concern. In their eyes, there was also hope for the long-awaited freedom. While everyone was emotionally preparing to go on deck, Hal breathed a sigh of relief, because he hoped that he would no longer have to endure disrespect towards himself. Samson suggested filming Volga's final video about survival against the backdrop of the ship. He gathered everyone and began to tell the camera that their mission had finally come to an end. The blogger told his subscribers that they had managed to survive and would soon get out of this island. But before he could say anything about likes and subscriptions to his channel, the ship behind him exploded. The crew in horror approached the sea to see that their only hope of salvation had just burned up. Everyone was in shock. Lana asked hopefully if it was really their ship. The guys couldn't understand what caused the explosion. They even naively assumed that it was special effects for a show on camera. But Samson, in a panic of hopelessness, declared that this was not part of his plans, and the ship actually exploded for no apparent reason. Unfortunately, this was the only option to return home, and right before their eyes, the option disappeared. Kim began to bombard the blogger with questions about how the ship could have exploded and how they would get out of here. Samson, with a glassy gaze and a mess in his head, replied that he had no idea. The blonde told the blogger to try to call someone on a cell phone to ask for help, but he was already working hard on this, trying again and again to make contact. Samson found his phone's battery was catastrophically low. Anna hysterically asked what would happen to them now. The blogger replied that he would try to start a broadcast from here to ask for help. The blogger maniacally started running along the shore to catch a network. Kim reminded him to turn on the power-saving mode on his phone. Hal and Lana discussed how this could have happened, since everyone was standing with their backs to the sea and no one saw the moment of the fire. While the team was frantically trying to fix the situation, little Mike, completely confused, quietly approached the water. With fear and loss of hope, he looked at the remains of the ship and tried to understand why it exploded and whether this was the end. While Samson was running around with his phone looking for a network, the battery was draining at lightning speed. Anna began to shed tears in the face of her hopeless situation and did not understand what to do next if the phone turned off. They were brought back to their senses a little by Lana, who addressed everyone with an important question. The beauty asked why they didn't look through the things for power banks that the blogger was supposed to take with him. Kim and Anna were pleased to have the specified battery power supplies and waited with hope for Samson's answer. But the VTuber star quietly and shamefully replied that his power bank had been taken by the club staff. But in order not to fall flat on his face, Samson said that, unlike him, all the team members could take power banks with them. Therefore, he suggested going to the luggage and looking for them. The guys quickly rushed to their bags and each took out his own power bank to figure out which one would work. Unfortunately, everyone had different models and none of them fit Samson's phone. The blogger decided to ask Hal and Mike about the availability of chargers. Since the guys did not go with them, Samson went to their beach. The VTuber star ran towards them at breakneck speed, shouting as he went to attract their attention. He took a moment to catch his breath to say what he needed and saw a terrible picture. Mike's arm was in a deplorable state. It was all swollen and discolored. The boy needed immediate help. After all, strange reliefs, swelling of veins, and pulsation appeared on it. It is difficult to imagine what pain Mike was forced to endure all the way. This sight shocked Samson. He even forgot how to speak for a moment. Hal continued examining the hand. He pressed on certain areas and asked the boy where it hurt. This was to understand where there were still living nerve endings. At this point, the rest of the team came running. They asked the blogger a bunch of questions, but he was more interested in whether Mike's hand would mutate further. Samson, without a drop of compassion, shouted that his hand should be cut off because he was disgusted to look at it. Such a portion of unpleasant attention oppressed the boy, who had previously been downcast. He became completely withdrawn. Having spoken, the blogger remembered why he came in the first place and asked if the guys had a power bank with them. Hal answered briefly that he had not taken him to the island. After all, he had not counted on staying there for long. Samson reacted rudely but did not dwell on him. He switched to the boy. Mike replied that he had a power bank in his bag. The blogger started to rush him because the percentage of charge on the phone was already minimal. The impudent duet of Samson and Kim ordered the boy to immediately go into the forest and look for the bag. The guys insulted him from behind and told him to stay away so that they wouldn't look at his hand again. Mike walked towards the camp with great effort, but no one cared about his pain. They were more interested in the bag with the necessary thing. The battery was draining at an incredible rate. Kim demanded that the boy look for his bag as quickly as possible. As soon as Mike pointed to his bag, the blonde snatched it, scolding him for his slowness in such a serious situation. Kim unceremoniously shook the entire contents of Mike's bag onto the ground, mixing everything with dust and dirt. When the blonde found the power bank, he threw the bag at the boy and ran to hand the find to the blogger. Samson hurried him, citing the fact that the phone was about to turn off due to lack of power. Finally, the phone started charging, but it was going to take some time, so the blogger asked everyone to wait a little. Kim and Samson were glad that they managed to find a power bank, but as soon as this problem was solved, their thoughts returned to the ship that had exploded so unexpectedly. Mike sat down in a stupor near his things, looking at them as if into the past. He involuntarily began to think that only these things connected him with his past life, but even they were mixed with dirt. The boys slowly began to converge on the beach, wandering around like lonely shadows, bewildered by what was happening. Our boy finally found the strength to pull himself together and go out to the beach with the others. Lana caught him almost on the move. She asked him to stop and show her hand. The girl said that she had rummaged through her things a little and found some useful medicines. Lana carefully began to disinfect the boy's wounds and bandage them with fresh, sterile bandages. Finding himself in the company of a person who knows how to sympathize, Mike gave free rein to tears and emotions. He was afraid that now they wouldn't be able to get out of here, that he wouldn't be able to get to the hospital in time. But Lana calmed him down, saying that thanks to him there was an opportunity to charge the phone and contact the outside world. While the boys were busy with their own affairs and worries, a suspicious silhouette was watching them in the depths of the forest, which, like a ghost, was hiding from sunlight and prying eyes. At the moment of bandaging, Samson approached the boys with an extremely dissatisfied face and complaints. The gist of the complaint was that Mike's power bank was not charged, but the boy himself did not understand how this could happen. But the device was indeed flashing red and the blogger was beside himself with rage. Mike said excitedly that he most likely forgot to charge it before the trip. In principle, no one could have predicted such a situation, and it is quite possible to forget to do something. Only Samson decided to shift all responsibility for this incident onto Mike and his discharged charging device. He yelled at the boy in a voice that was not his own, as if he could know in advance what would happen to them. Samson menacingly insisted that the team now had no chance of surviving precisely because of Mike. The blogger's shout brought the others to the scene. Everyone was asking what happened and what was the reason for the showdown. Samson turned to the audience and colorfully threw mud at the boy for not charging his power bank before the trip. He insulted Mike without censorship, even went personal. After all, shifting responsibility to the weak is his style. Kim, with fear in his eyes and voice, asked the blogger what would happen to everyone now. Samson loudly declared that now they were all stuck here because of Mike. The most emotional ones immediately started to throw tantrums. Anna was sobbing, and the blonde was screaming at the whole island from despair. While the two were shouting about how they wanted to live longer, Hal remained calm and thought about a backup solution to the problem. Mike listened to all this and fell into even greater despair. He did not understand why such a burden of shame was placed on him for a banal mistake that anyone could make. Kim decided to personally express his dissatisfaction to the boy, so he approached and accused him of everything, just like Samson had before him. Mike couldn't understand the reason for the accusations until the very end, because this could have happened to anyone. It's not every day that people end up on a deserted island with monsters. Being prepared for this is simply unrealistic. But the blonde, due to his narrow-mindedness, did not want to listen to anything, so he decided to vent his anger in physical violence against the weakest. Hal stopped him and told him to calm down because fighting wouldn't help matters. Kim kicked in the boy's arms and screamed that they would all die now because of the little bungler. Samson at this time was looking at his phone and thinking about the huge prospect that could await them upon returning home. He didn't come here to die, but for incomparable content for the viewers of his channel. The blogger abruptly and loudly ordered the team to shut up and listen carefully to his words. Samson insisted that the situation was difficult, and they were really stuck here. But while they were alive, they had to fight. The VTuber star decided to raise the team spirit, so he started talking about the opportunities that await them at home. Some motivation not to give up and go all the way, not to lose heart and look for solutions to the problem. Samson claimed that such an opportunity is given once in a lifetime and not to everyone, that each of them upon returning can forget about financial difficulties forever. The blogger proudly declared that he would definitely survive and achieve success, no matter what it took. He reinforced his agitation by reminding the boys of their primary purpose for coming here, namely money. And he mentioned that in order to achieve success, one must fight to the death. Samson knows how to inspire and convey information. Apparently, he has such a gift. After all, the team was really ready to tear any dinosaur to pieces after such a speech. Following the blogger, the guys amicably reached the camp with their things. He told them to take only the most necessary luggage with them, because it was not known how long they would have to stay here. Everyone got down to business. Kim, for example, started raking up chocolate bars, because he couldn't imagine life without them. Hal was much more prudent and took his multifunctional knife for hiking. Anna was more worried about her appearance than anything else, so she went off to change. And I made sure to grab a mirror to always look irresistible. Lana collected the necessary things and put a dear photo of her family with them to remember who she was here for. The sun was setting behind the horizon. It was necessary to leave the forest as quickly as possible. When the guys came out in full gear, the blogger asked if they were ready to go. Kim decided to ask about the further plan of action. After all, no one understood what to do. Samson, without much thought, said that he saw no better option than to simply sit on the shore and wait for help. Anna was a little confused by this arrangement, because she expected something more impressive from the leader of their pack. The blogger argued that he has 3 million subscribers to his channel. Therefore, sooner or later, everyone will realize that he is missing and start searching. He also said that in this situation, it is better to be on the beach than in the forest, because it is safer. Samson claimed that only in stupid horror films do people leave a safe place for no apparent reason. Sitting by the fire, the team listened to the blogger and agreed with him, because there really were no other options. Hal was on the sidelines as always, and Lana took advantage of the opportunity to apologize to him for what she had said recently. She said too much in the heat of the moment, and it gave the girl no peace. After all, everyone on this island pursues their own mercantile goals, and Hal is no exception. While the guys were chatting under the sound of the waves, our impressionable blonde noticed them. Kim, with an armful of brushwood, was nervous about the two of them getting back together. He had his own plans for Lana, so he was unhappy with what he saw. It was at this moment that Mike, who was slowly collecting sticks for the fire, came into his hot hands. Kim pushed him to drive away his anger and ordered him not to get underfoot. Somewhere nearby in the thicket of the forest, the monster smelled food and his eyes lit up with the desire to feast. The blonde continued to keep the fire going, and each time he returned with brushwood, he looked at Lana and Hal with displeasure. This sight made him terribly angry, and he was also indignant that all the work had been put on him. While searching for sticks suitable for a fire, Kim saw the eerie outline of human remains in the bushes. The guy was horrified. He threw everything out of his hands in a fit of emotion and started screaming loudly. But as soon as he came to, he discovered that there were no remains there, and there was no need to panic. The blonde tried to understand what kind of tricks his psyche was playing on him. Was it real, or did it just seem that way? But he still decided not to think about it for long, so he gathered his sticks and went to the others. At this time, Anna was asking the blogger about this island. Samson knew some things about this place, namely that people die here. Some websites even mentioned the presence of dinosaur-like monsters on the island. He really knew all this before his arrival, but he was sure that it was just nonsense and he needed it. But now the blogger really doesn't know what to do. Samson, despite the complexity of the situation, refused to believe that he could die here. It seemed to him that having gone through such a path, one could not simply give up. He shared his optimism with Anna, assuring her that he would protect the girl from any troubles and dangers. She listened to these promises with her mouth open and admired them. The idyll did not last long, because Hal approached them with a serious face. Samson immediately tensed up and asked what he needed. The guy briefly and confidently stated that it was impossible to stay on the shore for long, and that it was necessary to change the location. This statement discouraged the blogger. He did not understand what it was for and demanded an explanation. Hal replied that it was unknown when rescuers would arrive and supplies were already miles away. In addition, a fire in an open area could attract predators who would happily eat everyone. The arguments were weighty, and Samson decided to ask the guy how he saw the further plan of action for universal salvation. Hal reminded them of a building with electricity in the forest they had passed recently. He said that it would be possible to charge a power bank in this place. Kim was terrified at the very thought of going into the forest thicket. So when he heard the new plan, he began to grind his teeth in panic. Samson rejected this idea. He insisted that going into the forest was dangerous, but sitting on the shore was the most brilliant thing that could be. Hal was furious at this reaction, because he did not want to die of hunger waiting for help that was not a fact that it would come. The blogger was not affected by his indignation. He said that if he doesn't want to sit and wait, then he should go himself. Samson refused to admit that he was right, so he put on a comedy, telling the guy to go into the forest alone. He referred to the fact that it is not worth risking everyone for the sake of charging the power bank, and it is quite reasonable to charge one. Lana was infuriated by the blogger's behavior. She scolded him for such an attitude towards human life. After all, it is known that going into the forest alone is suicide. Simpson brushed off her accusations because, according to him, no one is forcing Hal to go anywhere. It is his personal desire to show initiative. The blogger thought that the guy wanted to once again present himself as a hero, so he told him to go wherever his heart desired. The narcissistic VTuber didn't think about the well-being of the team. He was playing some kind of game, or fighting for the right to be the main one. Even in survival conditions, Samson found a moment to insult Hal, recalling his past. The blogger also added that all decent YouTubers laugh at Hal, hinting at his worthlessness. Anna wondered why the other VTubers despised the guy. Samson happily told the girl how Hal got drunk during the broadcast and hit one VTuber. It was because of this incident that everyone made fun of the guy. No one cared about Hal's motives. Everyone just wanted to get more hype and spread gossip. Deep down inside, this hurt the guy, but he still didn't want to justify himself. Lana saw Hal starting to get ready to leave and decided to ask if he was sure of what he was doing. The girl did not want him to risk himself like that and was still inclined to listen to Samson's words. But Hal wasn't going to sit back and wait for a miracle from heaven. After all, he hadn't come here for fun. He didn't even want to be around these terrible and hypocritical people. Meanwhile, Samson watched from afar as his competitor prepared to set out. The blogger wasn't going to risk his life for the team, so he looked with a smirk at Hal, who wanted to help everyone even at the cost of his own life. Anna decided to find out more about the guy's antics, so she asked Samson to tell her something interesting about him and why he was considered trash. The VTube star was only too happy to throw mud at Hal, so he started yelling loudly about how a guy on an alcohol stream beat up the host. Anna was surprised, because she considered him very smart and brave in extreme conditions. Samson claimed that after such a disgrace, Hal begged him on his knees for help. And in order to show himself in the best light, he said that he was happy to help his old friend, and in return he did not even receive gratitude. After hearing this, the girl silently looked at Hal with condemnation and contempt. Kim was excited that Lana was going to support the rebellion and go with Hal. Samson was not at all embarrassed by this. He was determined to send all those who were not subject to his control after Hal. But this determined couple was not interested in the opinion of such a two-faced and narcissistic person. Their goal was good, so they were determined to go. Kim was angry that the lady of his heart preferred another, so in anger he threw a stick near the fire and began to complain. The blonde told everyone that he was going to relieve himself in the bushes and left with a sullen face. Samson was surprised by his behavior because he could not understand what had made him so angry. The guy was broken, lost in thought. He had already moved away from the fire. There was no face on him. Kim was angry that Lana didn't notice all his attempts to hint at sympathy, all his kind gestures, and ultimately chose not him. While doing his business, he out loud compared his appearance to Hal's. It seemed to him that there was not much difference. Staring into the distance with an angry gaze, the blonde cursed Hal with all his might, when suddenly the guy noticed something strange. In the twilight of the night, silhouettes of human bodies were visible, similar to those that were before. Kim didn't look closely at first because mosquitoes started to attack him and he had to fight them off. But soon the blonde finally got a good look at this nightmarish sight. These bodies were hanging on something. It was not hard to see. Kim quickly hid his dignity by buttoning up his shorts. This time he wasn't imagining it. The dead people were real. The guy just didn't understand why they were in limbo, so he froze in a stupor, as if he was waiting for something. Suddenly the bushes began to move and the breathing of some large creature could be heard. The answer to the question was not long in coming. The dead man was placed on the horns of a huge dinosaur with red eyes, who was clearly not happy with this revelation. Samson and Anna were having a nice conversation by the fire, when suddenly this idyll was interrupted by a strange sound somewhere nearby. Kim ran out of the bushes as fast as he could and shouted at the blogger as he ran. The blonde screamed that he needed to run away from here immediately, and the ferocious monsters behind him were proof of that. Anna screamed in horror, but Samson told her to hide behind his back for safety. The dinosaurs were so huge that even the bravest hero would be terrified by their appearance. Their roar and red eyes were especially panic-inducing. Consequently, Samson's good desire to protect the beautiful girl immediately evaporated when he saw the monsters, and the blogger ran away safely. A herd of dinosaurs ran along the shore at high speed and reached Lana, who did not expect such a turn of events at all. Fear constrained her movements, so when she tried to run away from the monsters, the girl simply fell. Fortunately, at that moment, Hal appeared and instantly pushed the girl out from under the feet of the madly rushing creatures. It was necessary to act very quickly, so the guy did not bother with comfortable conditions for landing. Lana hit herself a little, but still survived. The girl did not expect to see him, because she was completely sure that he had gone into the forest and would not return. Hal knew very well that everyone was in a panic and unable to think straight, so he spoke loudly to them, begging them to calm down and listen to his further instructions for their own good. The guy ordered everyone to immediately run into the thicket of the forest, because this is the territory of these creatures, and they will defend it to the end. Such are their instincts. Seeing the approaching ferocious pack of monsters, no one thought of arguing with Hal, so the team rushed into the forest together. Anna was the last one to run, and the dinosaurs had almost caught up with her. The poor thing was too scared to run any further, so she just curled up into a ball and waited for her end. But luckily, the monster's path was blocked by trees. The team froze watching all this. After all, they were of course counting on being rescued, but they didn't expect everything to be so simple. The dinosaurs just calmly left a moment later. There could have been several reasons for this. Either the forest was no longer their territory, or they calmed down after driving the strangers out of theirs. Lana, despite being out of breath, still decided to ask why Hal had returned to them. Hal calmly replied that he heard screams and decided to go back to help. After this, Anna remembered the name of the species of these dinosaurs from her school years. In appearance and inclinations, they were like triceratops. But the very thought that they exist to this day was very frightening. Samson took advantage of the moment and decided to show who was boss again. Citing the fact that the dinosaurs had left in fear, the blogger ordered everyone to return to the shore again. Hal decided not to remain silent this time, so he firmly rejected this idea. He reminded everyone that he had warned everyone earlier about the danger of making a fire on the shore and the consequences. The guy also reminded that there are triceratops living on the shore, who do not intend to let strangers into their territory. The team slowly began to listen to him. Hal stated with complete confidence that there was no peaceful place to live on this island, so he agitated the boys to go with him and stick together. These words, although true, hurt Samson's pride as never before. Turning his back to the guy, the blogger, with his characteristic arrogance, said that no one would go anywhere with him. Hal was not going to tolerate this rudeness either. He calmly but confidently grabbed the VTB star by the collar. The guy decided to clarify that he had offered to go with the guys, but there was no talk about the blogger. He himself was a little shocked by such a statement, but still tried to keep up appearances and confidence in his rightness to the last. He ordered Hal to take his hands off him immediately, but the guy wasn't going to let him go, so he rejected this next order. Hal argued that if Samson left now, he would definitely die, and with him, the phone would disappear, thanks to which everyone had gathered here. So the guy told the blogger to give him the phone and go wherever he wanted. The VTube star could no longer allow himself to be treated like this, and he angrily broke free from Hal's death grip. At this point, the blogger even found it funny that the guy was trying to threaten him. After all, he wasn't going to die. Samson headed towards the shore with complete confidence and declared that he and the boys did not need Hal's help, and that no one would go with him. But he didn't take into account the fact that the boys were determined to go on with Hal. Even those most loyal to Samson turned on their logic and began to reasonably consider their own safety. The blogger did not expect such a turn of events because he expected to be the undisputed leader until he returned home. He asked with confusion if the guys were coming with him, but Kim and Anna froze in place and just silently looked at him. Yes, he has a phone, but life is more important now. Hal noted that since no one wanted to go further with Samson, there must be good reasons for that. The guy wanted to bring the star down to earth and make him look into the eyes of real facts. And as soon as Hal said that Samson's actions and words were the reason for the team's mistrust, it was as if the ground beneath the blogger's feet fell away. He couldn't come to terms with the truth, so he made a whole tragedy out of it. Samson said that the guy had crossed the line and would now be exposed. The blogger said that from the very beginning, he was not delighted with Hal's hypocritical heroism, because he could have saved someone himself. Samson was slowly losing his mind. He said that he had tolerated the guy for a long time, but now he was not going to pretend to be an understanding person. After all, he did not consider Hal honest and brave. He stated that only he knew how pathetic this guy was. Samson's eye twitched with the desire to tell everyone about Hal's life in order to humiliate him and solemnly regain his title of leader. Instantly, a rotten stream of insults poured from the blogger's lips. He talked about Hal's sick mother, who has been in need of medical care for a long time, but her stupid son is unable to pay the hospital bills. He talked about the guy's unfulfilled dreams of becoming a firefighter and how he beat up a man on live television while drunk. Samson claimed that this hopeless man was begging him for help on his knees. The boys listened to this with bewilderment, because even if all this was true, it was Hal's personal business. The blogger got into a rage. He accused the guy of hopelessness and hypocrisy. He also added that he would never become a good leader in life. Samson claimed that he felt sorry for Hal's mother because she had such a worthless son. Meanwhile, Hal's nerves were already giving out. He was on the edge. The blogger ridiculed his opponent as best he could and made fun of his silence, considering himself the king of the situation. When Samson, with full confidence in the elimination of his opponent, was already preparing to celebrate his victory, Hal's answer was already being prepared behind his back. A guy in a fit of rage hit a blogger with all his might who had baselessly slandered him. All this time, Hal helped the team with pure motives. He silently endured all the ridicule for the sake of money for his mother. But there is a limit to everything, so now he gave free rein to his anger and splashed it out on the root of all the problems. Samson. The guys watched what was happening in horror. They couldn't intervene for two reasons. The first was clearly fear. The second, the blogger deserved it. Samson started to panic for a moment, so he asked the guy to stop. Only Hal was going to show him how much pain the blogger's toxic words had caused him. To find out the truth about Hal, we need to go back a bit. Namely, that broadcast of Han, because of which our guy has a bad reputation. Then the well-known VTuber Han was conducting another stream for his audience, to which he invited guests. Among the guests was Hal, known as a blogger with health content. Also invited was social media star Brittany, popular for her attractive appearance. Hal was asked about training to become a firefighter. The guy answered hesitantly that it was because of the training that he wanted to help others by posting videos of physical activity online. Everyone noticed how nervous Hal was, because it was his first time on such a big broadcast. But everyone was just touched and amused by this. People in the comments were happy to see him. Leading blogger Han asked if this was the guy's first broadcast since he started running his health channel. He awkwardly confirmed it. Hong decided to tell the public a little about his guest. He praised his channel and activities because sports are very important for health, and it's good when someone shows how to do it correctly. Keeping the conversation going, Hong asked how many people subscribed to Hal. The guy replied that he didn't expect such interest in his content from the community. That's why he was very surprised when he became popular. His honesty and sincerity won people over, and the reaction to this guest from viewers became even better. There is such a thing as a sound donation on streams. One of the viewers decided to make fun of the host and sent 50,000 won with an insult to Hong's physique, comparing him to an anchovy. The guests laughed. The viewers also picked up the joke and started writing comments. And the blogger demanded that the administrator block such jokers so as not to hurt his pride. After a little confusion, Hong began to introduce the second guest to the audience. The beautiful Bree greeted everyone and smiled sweetly. The audience reaction was colossal. A wave of delight and compliments poured in for this girl. Bree had her own signature mini dance, so seeing such delight of people, she decided to dance to warm them up even more. It worked. Viewers flooded the stream with comments and donations. Everyone was crazy about Bree's beauty, wanting to eat her with their eyes. Only our Hal felt awkward and uncomfortable with such behavior of the girl. After introducing the guests to the viewers, Hong announced a break before the most interesting part of the broadcast, the alcohol mukbang. He promised his subscribers that he would return to the broadcast in 10 minutes when everything was ready. Hal and Bree said goodbye to the audience during the break, and the host asked viewers to share the link to the broadcast and join them in 10 minutes. Behind the scenes, there was a huge team of assistants and a bunch of auxiliary equipment for recording the broadcast, which emphasized the status of the channel. Hall encouraged Brittany and was happy with the successful broadcast. He praised everyone for their good work and went to rest. Everyone was busy with their own affairs. The host told the guests to rest and eat in order to return to the studio full of strength. Bree sweetly praised Hal for his good work on camera, but the guy only thanked her briefly without emotion. He was puzzled by the countless notifications on his phone from subscribers who were watching him on this show with admiration and surprise. The large broadcast and such a huge audience gave him mixed feelings that he had not experienced before. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a message about payment for his mother's hospitalization. Hal sighed heavily because the financial situation was difficult, and he tried his best to somehow take care of his mother, to maintain her fragile health. All hope was on this stream. Walking past the dressing room, the guy heard the administrators and the host talking about Brittany and some dirty plans for her. Hal involuntarily came closer and heard that these guys were discussing the beauty of today's guest, her dance, and the reactions of the audience to it. Hall told the administrators to stop the idle talk and prepare alcohol for the game. He also asked to make something strong so that the girl would get drunk and would not be able to control herself. The guys in the dressing room laughed lustfully, without a hint of condemnation and with understanding. Hall smoked and talked about how he would only focus on Bree during the game. He smirked and claimed that after a hard day, this beauty would help him relax to the fullest, whether she wanted it or not. Hal was a man of principles, so when he heard this horror, he was simply shocked. Despite his good looks and good nature, Hal turned out to be a real scoundrel. Hal knew that he would unwittingly become an accomplice if he did nothing, While our hero was standing under the dressing room and thinking what to do, the door opened and Hall himself came out. The presenter smiled and politely invited the guy into the studio, referring to the imminent start of the broadcast. He cheerfully stated, as if nothing had happened, that there would be a lot of spectators today, and there would be an excellent opportunity to earn money. While the blogger was rejoicing at the prospect of today, Hal stood rooted to the spot and didn't know what to say. On one side of the scale stood justice and the honor of an innocent girl, and on the other, money for the mother. Everyone gathered in the studio and began the second part of the broadcast, greeting the viewers and promising real fun with drinks. Bree drank one shot after another, and Hal, as promised, was focused only on her in the dressing room. Hal just sipped his drink nervously and reservedly, watching all this with concern. The broadcast was in full swing. A lot had already been drunk, so the passions in the studio were growing at a rapid pace. At this point, Hall suggested adding something fun to their get-together. It was a punishment game. Whoever loses gets to drink. Behind the scenes, assistants were already preparing containers with very strong alcohol, following Hall's instructions. Our hero noticed this and began to panic because he knew why all this was being done. As soon as the game started, Hal deliberately lost by gritting his teeth and drinking all the penalty shots. Bree, unsuspecting, laughed at the boy. She said that he didn't know how to play at all. Hal was in a terrible state. Fortunately, he was an athlete. After all, such a dose of alcohol could easily kill an ordinary guy. The host was not happy that his plan collapsed just like the dice in the game. The blogger decided to send the guy away and continue the game only with Bree in order to finally realize his plan. Hall told the manager to take the guest to the restroom. The guy, hearing this, began to make strange sounds because it was difficult to speak sensibly. They laughed at him, citing the effects of the alcohol he had drunk. But they still really wanted to understand what the guy was trying to say. The chat room viewers were going crazy with fun. It was a fantastic sight for them. After all, people always crave bread and circuses. Hall foolishly decided to develop the situation for the sake of the air. He approached Hal with a grin and began to demand that he clearly state his thoughts. The guest's answer was short and unexpected. Hal demanded the host to stop and called him the most appropriate word, going against his plans for the girl. Our hero came to his senses and declared that he was aware of his scam and vile intentions. He also said that he considered the host an infinitely pathetic person. In order not to lose face in front of Bree and the audience, Hall pretended that he had no idea what was being discussed. Hall, smiling, referred to the guy's extremely large dose of alcohol and politely urged the manager to take him off the air. The blogger's team tried to take Hal to the break room, but the guy resisted in every possible way. Hall put his hand on Bree's shoulders as she sat in shock and continued broadcasting. He asked viewers to ignore his guest's drunken ramblings, as that often happens when he's drunk. After these words, our hero seemed to lose his mind. He broke free from the manager's hands and attacked the host with his fists. The viewers in the chat did not understand what was happening at all. Hal beat the blogger to the fullest extent. He didn't even always have time to ask him to stop and ask for help. Hal was completely overcome with anger at the injustice. No one could stop him, so the police had to be called. The press and rumors were buzzing with scandalous news about a deranged athlete who beat up a blogger on live TV. But there was not a word about Hal's real motives, who simply could not allow the girl's honor to be desecrated. The guy sat in a dark room and tried to understand where he had made a mistake. After all, the desire to help had led to a lot of trouble. After all this, Hall blackmailed the guy. He said that the police had all the evidence of the attack and that going to court would not be a problem at all. However, the blogger proposed a second solution to the situation. He asked for a ridiculous compensation of 5,000 won, but the mandatory condition was the suspension of the channel about health and sports. Also asked to keep quiet about everything that Hal heard in the dressing room. Therefore, our guy again faced an unimaginably difficult choice. He had no choice but to turn to his old friend with whom he had studied together. If it were not for his obligations to his mother, he would never have asked Samson for help in his life. Returning from his memories, Hal stopped hitting Samson and was quiet for a moment. The guy told the team to listen to him from now on and follow all his instructions if they wanted to survive in this place. Samson sat on the ground, beaten from head to toe, but still did not intend to back down from his words. Hal told him to sit still and listen carefully. The boys just watched excitedly. The blogger hunched over even more and turned his face away in protest at the demands. For this, he was immediately hit on the head. Hal wanted to make sure of the obedience of this rebel who was always getting them all into trouble. The guy said that because of the blogger's pride, The guys found themselves in danger more than once and risked their lives. Samson did not react to his words in any way, because he really did not want to admit his mistakes. Hal demanded that he answer honestly for his actions to the people who trusted him. So Samson barely managed to squeeze out a quiet, yes. The hero continued to press the blogger with uncomfortable questions. He asked whether Samson considered himself right or not. The blogger stubbornly remained silent, so Hal began to get angry. He literally put moral pressure on Samson so that he would finally admit his guilt. The VTube star could not restrain himself. He blamed Hal for all his troubles again and said that upon returning home he would definitely take revenge for all this. For his insolence and disobedience, Samson was again beaten by the guy, this time from his knee. The poor fellow writhed on the ground in pain, but still did not want to admit his mistakes. Hal declared that he would get out of this place without anyone's help, but if Samson interfered with him, he would bitterly regret it. The guy also urged the blogger to pretend that they were strangers upon his return. Otherwise, he threatened real violence. Hal demanded that Samson give him the phone. After all, he was no longer trusted and he could betray everyone at any moment for his own salvation and glory. The blogger did not react to his words, so to better understand the demand, Hal hit him in the face. Samson continued to sit silently on the ground. Then Hal stood up and said that up to this point he had asked politely, but now he would be more strict. The guy started kicking the blogger with all his might, literally trampling him into the ground, as if he wanted to show him where his place was. Lana was the only one who decided to stop him. She couldn't watch such blatant violence any longer. The girl stood between them and tried to explain that in these circumstances, they should help and support each other, but not fight for the right to be in charge. Lana urged to remain calm and not to give in to old grievances. After all, emotions in emergency situations only interfere with sound thinking. Hal stopped hitting Samson, but he still took the phone. He agreed that he had gone too far, but he was sure that it would be better to keep the phone on himself. Samson, despite numerous injuries, grabbed his gadget with all his might as if it were something extremely valuable. Hal looked at him with disgust and abruptly pulled out the phone, saying that he was endlessly irritated by his stubbornness and ignorance. The guy took the briefcase and told the team to follow him from now on. They needed to charge the phone as quickly as possible to get out of here. He said that no one needs to make any special efforts, just follow him without resistance. Hal asked the boys to take another look at Samson to learn what would happen to those who wanted to stop him from getting off the island or who would contradict him. It was a truly pathetic sight. After all, the blogger had to pay in full for his pride and disregard for people. Having finished with the election of a new leader, everyone finally went to look for thinner electricity, wandering through the dark forest. Suddenly, something went wrong. Mike started screaming and everyone stopped to figure out what was going on. The boy was holding his hand, which was hurting very badly. Lana was trying to support him and help him with something. The girl was concerned about Mike's condition and asked Hal to take a short break so that she could rest. The guy curtly refused her this. Lana didn't understand why there was such a rush because yesterday everything had been more measured. Hal explained that yesterday was a completely different situation. After all, then they knew the ship was coming and they were on time so they could afford to rest more. Anna surprisingly quickly switched to the side of the new leader. She argued that it was dangerous to be in the forest, and that it would be a reasonable decision to find a safe place to rest. Lana did not agree to go blindly in an unknown direction without stopping. Therefore, she continued to argue. Hal, like a madman, insisted that he should be listened to unconditionally. He said that he had clearly explained the fate of those who dared to contradict him or would not follow him. Lana did not expect such an answer at all, because she was simply worried about Mike's well-being. Hal informed the team that he read the road by the direction of the moss and the direction of the branches. He claimed that the walk was 10 minutes at most, so taking a break was not appropriate. The guy, after his words, silently went to the goal, because he knew that the team had no other choice but to trust him. Anna immediately ran after him. Her blatant hypocrisy made Lana extremely angry. After all, this girl, like a skilled actress, transforms into a personality that suits the situation. Anna turned on the cute little one and asked Hal ridiculous questions to win his favor. She asked not to be angry with the boys for their distrust, referring to the fact that Samson behaved the same way towards them. Anna also promised to be useful in any situation and to unconditionally carry out all his commands. Hal was not one of those who lack female attention, so he did not succumb to these tricks. The team finally reached their destination. In front of them was a room with bright lighting around the perimeter. Everyone was shocked that they actually got there in 10 minutes. The realization that their leader was a real strategist was a little scary. Samson was walking behind everyone. He collected his thoughts and asked everyone to stop and not go further. He claimed that this building was different from the previous one. Everyone looked at him in bewilderment. The blogger anxiously insisted that the signs on the buildings were different and that this was something completely different. Anna said cheerfully that the signs don't make any difference. After all, the main thing is that there is electricity. Samson frantically insisted on his own. He ordered the crew not to go inside, as if he knew something, and was thus trying to protect them. Hal began to think that this provocateur was up to his old tricks and warned that the blogger would get what he deserved for any prank. Samson shouted in a voice that was not his own, that an unprecedented danger was waiting for them inside. Suddenly, the team froze with an incomprehensible expression on their faces, looking towards Samson. The Vitubian star did not understand why they were looking at him like that. For a moment, he even thought that they were so impressed by his warning about the danger, but it wasn't quite like that. A monster from past adventures simply appeared behind Samson. In his head, the familiar axe was shining. The blogger couldn't understand the reason for the guy's behavior, so he decided to turn around and see what was there. Meanwhile, the ferocious dinosaur opened its mouth and started running towards them at high speed. Samson had practically no chance to dodge, but the dinosaur seemed not to see him and ran past. For some reason, the monster ran specifically towards Mike, not seeing anyone else around. He was very close and clearly wanted to get what he was going for. The dinosaur was about to tear the boy to pieces, but fortunately Hal arrived in time. He literally pulled Mike out of the beast's jaws, which actually saved his life. Hal loudly ordered the boys to immediately run inside the building to avoid becoming food. In such situations, no one needs to be told twice. The team, as never before, began to run ahead of the curve where they were told. Anna and Kim found the entrance to the building. It was a small, unremarkable red door. The two quickly rushed inside, worried only about their own skins. But Lana held the door for the leader and those who had not yet managed to run. Hal ran as fast as he could. He carried Mike under his arm, who was weak and unable to run on his own. The situation required incredible ingenuity and dexterity. After all, if they had delayed even for a second, they would have long since become dinner for the dinosaur, which pursued them unhindered to the very entrance of the building. When the team was already inside, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. After all, it was really very scary. Lana and Kim locked the door. The blonde was shocked that they managed to escape from this ferocious monster. Lana noticed that not all of the team members were in the shelter. Samson was missing, and he remained outside. The girl demanded to save him, but the guys reacted ambiguously to this. So much effort had just been spent, and she was suggesting to climb into the monster's mouth again. Since everyone was silent, Anna decided to speak out. She explained that the door couldn't be opened now because there was still a dinosaur roaming outside. Lana tried in every way to convince them to find a way to save Samson, because leaving him there to die was unacceptable. Anna coldly replied that the blogger would definitely survive, and if not, she would not be offended by them, because they were also in danger. Lana was literally beside herself with her answer. She couldn't understand how someone could be so easily abandoned to their fate. Anna asked the girl not to scream and to react to everything more easily. She reminded her that when Samson had disappeared in the forest earlier, Lana had intended not to worry about his life. But the beauty explained that these situations are completely different. Last time the blogger left on his own, so the responsibility for the troubles was only his. Now he needs the help of the team. Lana realized that it was pointless to talk to Anna, so she turned to Kim. After all, she believed that he, more than anyone else, should be worried about Samson, since they were close. But the blonde wasn't thinking about friendly relations with the blogger at all. He was more concerned about his own safety. Frankly speaking, it became clear to Lana at this moment that all their affection for Samson was only because of the phone and the opportunity to earn money on it. And the life of this man himself had no value for anyone. Lana, completely at a loss, decided to turn to Hal. She assured him that the blogger could still be alive and appealed to his compassion. Hal was cold and frank. He said that Samson was probably already dead, and there was no point in sacrificing a crowd of people for a corpse. The others began to rejoice that Hal had the blogger's phone. Their reaction outraged Lana. They all didn't care about the value of human life and were only concerned about their own benefit. Hal told everyone to stop talking and look for an outlet, but before he could finish speaking, a loud crash began to come from behind the door. The boys turned around in fear. The door was locked, but it seemed as if someone was knocking on it, as if they wanted to come in. Lana knew that a dinosaur wouldn't knock on the door. She thought it was definitely Samson, and she had to let him in before the dinosaur came back. Anna indignantly shouted that it was absolutely forbidden to open the door, even if the blogger was alive and needed help. The girls started arguing about the value of life again. Lana argued that you can't leave a person in trouble when you have a chance to help them. Anna doubted her rival's sanity because she didn't want to sacrifice herself for someone else. She didn't care about morality at all when it came to the safety of more people. While the beauties were arguing and almost started a fight, Hal froze with horror in his eyes, peering into the window on the door. After all, from there, the yellow eye of a monster looked at him, who had found his prey and was ready to take it at any cost. And it is clear that the small door will not be an obstacle. Hal quickly realized what was about to happen and shouted loudly for everyone to hide. There was little time. As soon as the new leader said this, the monster knocked down the door without much effort and burst inside with a loud squeal. It was some kind of inventory warehouse, so the guys quickly hid behind barrels and huge metal boxes. Everyone sat quietly, trying not to even breathe. Mike hid under the cabinets and trembled quietly, hoping for luck. After all, the dinosaur passed by him very close. Its red paws seemed to have passed by, but the monster seemed to know where to go. He could smell the boy and would definitely not go any further. The dinosaur bent his head under the cabinet and found Mike, staring at him with his fierce eyes. The monster, in a fit of instinct and hunger, pounced on him and was determined to finish the meal at any cost. Mike was terrified. He began to scream loudly and fuss. As before, his guardian angel was Hal, who pulled the boy out of the dinosaur's clutches in time. The monster didn't understand where his food had been taken, so he raised his poor head to look around. Suddenly, the room became very dark. The boys were confused and the dinosaur along with them. The reason was Samson, whom they had already buried. The blogger turned off the light switch with one movement of his hand. Hal decided that the blogger decided to help them in this way, confusing the dinosaur. He ordered everyone to take advantage of the opportunity to run to the exit. The boys immediately carried out the order. They all ran to the door as one, while the dinosaur tried to figure out what was going on. As soon as everyone except Hal and Mike ran out, the blogger slowly began to close the beast. His brilliant revenge might have worked if the boys hadn't pressed themselves against him and pushed him back inside. They were very scared of something. Samson could not understand why they were trying to re-enter the room with the monster instead of running to freedom. The thing is, it was even better outside. After all, there was a second gourmet waiting for them, who wouldn't mind a bite to eat. Our team of adventurers suffered a total failure. They were literally surrounded by monsters, had no idea where and from whom to run. These two dinosaurs were cute little things compared to what came and ate them. This made things a little easier for our guys, but it was still scary. The team did not expect such a turn of events. Here, of course, one could get tired of the change of those wishing to kill them, but still, this specimen inspired fear more than the others. A creepy and huge representative of the Mesozoic era stared at the guys with his red and hungry eyes, as if warning them that they were next in line for a trip into his stomach. The monster began to destroy the room to make it easier to catch them. The team did not wait and began to run as fast as they could away from this killing machine. They ran to the outer wall, but there were no more passages. It was a dead end. The dinosaur persistently destroyed everything around. Lana was terrified and constantly asked what to do. When everyone had already lost hope of salvation, Samson suddenly pulled the lever on the wall and activated the secret elevator, as if he knew about its presence here. The guys began to enter the elevator in a hurry, but still looked back at the monster. As soon as the elevator started moving, this huge dinosaur was almost there. It's scary to imagine what could have happened to them if the blogger hadn't found a loophole. Anna was filled with shock and adrenaline. She could believe that they had actually managed to escape. Samson happily assumed the role of savior. He boasted that everyone was alive only thanks to him, but his joy didn't last long. Hal hit the blogger in the face with all his might. Lana couldn't understand why the guy hit Samson just now, because he really helped everyone out. Hal didn't forget how the blogger wanted to leave him and Mike to certain death. Samson seriously wanted to close the door and leave them with the dinosaur in the building. The blogger denied the accusations, citing the fact that Hal may have misunderstood everything. For these words, Samson also received a kick. After all, only a blind man could not notice the lodges here. Lana heroically covered the blogger with her chest. She called on him to forget about the violence and not to give in to emotions. Hal stopped beating him, but he certainly didn't forget about the betrayal. Samson remembered everything too, but he didn't want to admit it. Suddenly, the elevator began to shake violently. Perhaps the mechanism was old and not designed for such a large number of people. Anna suffered from claustrophobia, so she was seriously worried about safety. After all, in addition to the fact that she was locked up, they were also shaking. Lana was more interested not in why they were going down so long, but in where. She asked Samson about this because he seemed to have a pretty good sense of direction. The fact that the blogger even knew about the existence of an elevator in this room aroused suspicion, and for good reason. The picture behind the fence of the sheet changed from the gray concrete walls into something reminiscent of the underworld. Huge cages made of strong metal became visible, in which it was clearly not ponies that were being kept. It was at this point that Samson confessed to the boys that he had been here before, which is why he was so well aware of the dangers and loopholes here. Lana recalled that the blogger, together with Kim, openly lied to everyone that he went to the toilet, although in fact he was here. Moreover, she was very offended by the fact that Samson then desperately denied it. The blogger, even after being exposed, tried to find some positives in his lie. He said that thanks to his previous prank, everyone is alive now. Samson asked everyone to forget about his innocent lie, but for Mike it was impossible. After all, he was dragged through the mud and forced to kneel for the truth. The elevator started making strange sounds again and shaking a lot. The guys got a little tense. Poor Anna was already struggling to endure this wild shaking in the confined space. Fortunately or not, the elevator finally landed on its final floor. The picture was alarming. Ahead was a long corridor with lighting on the cages. The guys asked Samson if he knew the way out of this place, but the blogger, like everyone else, was here for the first time. When the team passed by the cages, it became possible to find out what was inside. After all, the monsters, having sensed the guests, immediately became active and began to growl. Anna realized that dinosaurs were locked here and there were a lot of them. Literally all species were gathered into some kind of terrifying collection. Someone deliberately gathered them here and locked them up. But it was not clear why anyone would need such pets. While everyone was deciding whether to run back to the elevator or look for an outlet to charge their phone, Mike felt a little uneasy in this place. It seemed to him that the eyes of all the dinosaurs were focused on him. Something was drawing them to him, but what was unclear? Kim didn't really understand where to look for sockets, because there were only these cages with dinosaurs everywhere. It was pretty scary. Hal knew that electrical wiring was usually run through the wall, so he told everyone to go to the wall to find an outlet. The dinosaurs may be locked up, but they are still unpredictable. Hal insisted that there was no time to waste. The team tried to stick together and follow him, overcoming the fear of such terrible proximity to the monsters. Hal walked ahead of everyone, and suddenly his eyes caught sight of what he had been looking for so long. Everything was exactly as he said. Nearby, a wall was visible, at the bottom of which was a socket. The guys looked at him as if he were some kind of clairvoyant, although this is basic knowledge that firefighters are taught. Hal immediately plugged the phone directly into the wall outlet to save time and avoid using other charging devices. The guy also informed everyone that he was not going to wait for the phone to fully charge. He insisted that 10 minutes would be enough. He told the rest of us to rest and catch our breath for now. Samson peered at his phone from afar, as if he was planning something bad. Lana noticed Mike's unusual behavior, so she went over to ask how he was feeling. The boy replied that he felt rather strange. It was because Mike felt like everyone was looking at him, like he was special. The girl did not understand what kind of looks he felt on himself and who he was so afraid of. Mike looked at the cages and said that each pair of dinosaur eyes was staring at him like a laser beam, penetrating his bones. The dinosaurs were making noise and a lot of strange sounds all the time. But suddenly, Anna noticed that it suddenly became very quiet. A frightening silence reigned for unknown reasons, as if these creatures were planning something. It was at this moment that Mike's arm began to hurt badly. The boy even began to sweat from this unpleasant feeling. Lana was trying to figure out his hand. The girl asked the boy to show her his hand so she could help. The beauty, of course, understood that everything was bad with the hand, but she did not expect to see something so frightening. She screamed from what she saw, which attracted the attention of the rest of the team. Hal decided to come up and understand what happened and why the girl was scared. Lana and Mike looked at this mutilated limb and showed it to Hal. The hand was deformed, with a bunch of different bumps and convolutions. Even the color was unnaturally green. This sight reminded Hal of something. When he rescued Mike from the water, he saw mutated people at the bottom that resembled tree roots. Lana looked at him with eyes full of hope and asked him to help the boy because he was suffering a lot. Anna, despite her constant hypocrisy, also asked to give Mike first aid because she knew that firefighters are trained in this. Kim tried to cheer the boys up and randomly said that it wouldn't be hard. For some reason, he mentioned his years in the army and that they helped each other there too. As sad as it may sound, Hal decided to tell the boys the truth. The arm had to be amputated, and immediately. The team stared at him in silence. They didn't know how to react. Even in a hospital, it's scary to hear something like that. And here it's even more so. Mike hoped that Hal was joking. He refused to believe his words until the very end. Unfortunately, there was no time for jokes now. Hal suggested that the boy take a closer look at his hand to see how serious the situation was. It didn't look like a mild allergy or a wound. Hal said that the hand is mutating and the infection can go much further. The guy also expressed his guesses about the fact that the dinosaurs react strangely to Mike precisely because of his hand. Lana couldn't understand what it was about that hand that could attract dinosaurs, so she demanded an explanation. Hal recalled that earlier they were attacked by dinosaurs that only react to sound, but for some reason knew their location even when they were not making noise. He also mentioned other cases when the monsters did not react to anyone else in the team and confidently rushed towards the boy. Even here, the atmosphere was very strange. Mike himself could feel the dinosaurs' keen attention on him. Hal, in all seriousness, took out his camp knife and declared that the hand urgently needed to be cut off. The guy also warned that he didn't have any painkillers or anesthesia with him, so he would try to do everything as quickly as possible. His words really scared the boy. Lana covered Mike with her chest here too, so as not to let him be hurt. She asked Hal not to rush to conclusions and to think of another way to solve the problem. It seemed wild to her to cut a helpless boy alive like that, so she talked the leader out of it until the very end. The girl said that this place is not at all suitable for carrying out such a manipulation on a living person. Hal said calmly and confidently that if he didn't amputate his arm now, the infection would spread throughout his body and Mike would simply die. But this way, there would be at least some chance of saving his life and a small piece of his forearm. He didn't want to do it either, but unfortunately it was the only way out of the situation. Hal asked Lana not to interfere and get out of the way. The girl, despite his weighty arguments, still continued to assert that there were great risks in amputation under these conditions. Hal looked at her with a terrible, angry look, as if he had met with betrayal. He came closer and closer to her and kept saying that he would eliminate all the disobedient ones without hesitation or pity. Lana's insides clenched. During the argument, the lights in the room suddenly went out, and everyone started to worry. Kim and Anna, as always, were panicking and screaming more than anyone else. The loss of electricity scared them very much. Hal suddenly remembered the phone. He wanted to take it and quickly leave this place with the team. Anna was thinking about the elevator because without electricity it won't work. Accordingly, it will now be very difficult to get out. Since they were located deep underground, there were no windows. Without lighting, there was pitch darkness. No one knew what to do next. When Hal got to the outlet, he discovered that there was no phone there, only a charging cord. All these actions were driving me crazy. Everything happened quickly, and it was unclear what to expect next. Hal immediately noticed that Samson had disappeared along with the phone. He was already beginning to think that this was a setup. Kim and Anna called the blogger with hope in their eyes, hoping that he would respond or show up. Mike suddenly turned to Lana with a trembling voice. He said that since there was no electricity, the dinosaur cages were now open. Anna saw Samson's shirt moving towards her from the darkness. She was very happy that the blogger had not abandoned them. Only it wasn't him, but a huge feathered dinosaur with Samson's shirt in its mouth. Kim pointed a trembling finger at the approaching monster, realizing that it might have eaten the blogger. Mike was right. After the power went out, the cages opened and all the dinosaurs came out, surrounding the boys. These monsters were serious about the feast, so our heroes quickly looked for an exit to escape. It seemed that the generators were activated, illuminating the corridor behind them. They immediately rushed to run there, so as not to tempt fate and not tease the dinosaurs with Mike's hand. Hal came across an emergency button that, in the event of a fire, blocks the source of the fire with a reliable and durable door and does not allow it to spread further. In this case, it could help stop the dinosaurs, so he quickly pressed it. There was very little left before the door was completely closed, but one of the dinosaurs managed to stick its hungry mouth through the crack. Hal was not going to give them a chance to get inside, so he masterfully stuck his knife into the monster. Thanks to his numerous knife strikes on the dinosaur, it finally gave in and retracted its mouth. Consequently, the door closed safely. When everyone was safe, Anna finally decided to ask everyone if they had seen Samson's shirt in the monster's mouth. The girl couldn't believe that the blogger was dead. Kim was more worried about the phone that was missing. After all, now there was no way to call for help, and he was completely silent about earning money. Hal suddenly started swearing loudly and cursing everything. The guys turned around to see what was causing this reaction. The guy froze for a moment and stared at that solid emergency door. Anna was confused by his behavior, so she anxiously asked what exactly was bothering him. Hal turned and stared at her with glassy eyes, full of evil and despair. The boy came as close to her as possible and began to speak. He said that because of the stubborn Samson, who always did everything his own way, they found themselves in a terrible situation. He said that because of the blogger's stupidity, they found themselves without a phone in an unknown place and without the ability to call for help. Nervously but confidently, Hal told everyone to listen to him and not argue when he told them to do something. The guys were shocked by his tone, but in principle they had no other choice. Anna, with a trembling voice, dared to ask about further actions. Hal, with the same expression on his face and coldness in his voice, said that he intended to cut off Mike's hand because he considered it the right decision. The team couldn't get their heads around it. People who had lived in society their entire lives and were accustomed to good medicine couldn't imagine amputating a limb in such barbaric conditions. When Hal was already heading towards the boy, Lana stood in front of him and asked if it was possible to postpone this procedure for a bit. But she was afraid to start an open argument again. But she couldn't do nothing either. The team leader explained once again that this was necessary. After all, dinosaurs were hot on their heels. Because of this hand, everyone would be constantly exposed to great danger. Moreover, the infection spreads throughout the body, and it will not be possible to postpone the amputation until the hospital. It will be too late. Hal insisted that there was no reason to stall. It simply wouldn't do any good, and now they had no phone, so it would take longer to get out. And Mike didn't have that much time. Lana still continued to prevent Hal from doing what he had planned, but the guy calmed her down by hitting her fist against the wall with all his might. He got tired of repeating obvious things 5 times. He told the guys to either offer their own solutions to the problem or not to argue with him. In this particular case, no one had any suggestions, so everyone just looked at Hal in silence. When he approached Mike, the boy looked at him with frightened eyes, hoping that the guy would change his mind. Hal took the matter seriously. He prepared antiseptics, water, a first aid kit with bandages, and other things. To disinfect the knife, the guy burned it with a lighter. This could also help speed up the amputation process and cauterize the red liquid coming out of the wound. Everything was ready. The boy was laid on the floor. Mike was very afraid, but followed Hal's instructions without fail. Kim assisted by tightening the cord on Mike's arm. Hal asked him to tighten it so that no blood would flow into the arm and there would be minimal blood loss. The guy understood perfectly well what state Mike was in. He put his hand on his head and opened his eye. Hal warned the boy that it would be very painful, but he asked him to endure this torment for the sake of all the boys. Hal didn't take long to speak, and immediately after his words, he began to cut. Mike screamed in a voice that wasn't his own. The girls were in a panic and didn't understand how it had come to this. Mike struggled and screamed that he couldn't live as a cripple. Kim held his legs with all his might. Hal asked the boy for forgiveness and said that there was no other choice, no matter how much he begged and cried. At the moment of amputation, Mike screamed very loudly because there was no anesthesia. It was hard for everyone to listen to this heartbreaking scream. Fortunately, it was all over. Hal announced the amputation had been successfully completed. He also said that the boy would need more food and water to quickly regain his strength, so he asked everyone to be understanding. He also suggested that the boys take a little rest after the work they had done, and only then move on. Hal praised everyone for their courage and endurance in this difficult task. But the boys were not happy with such support. After all, each of them felt the boy's pain on themselves, hearing and looking at his suffering. Tired of screaming and crying, Mike sat near the wall with dull eyes and thought about something. Lana ran up to him and started asking about his condition, because she was the one who was most worried about him. The boy had silent tears running down his cheeks, and his eyes were full of despair and misunderstanding. He quietly asked the girl what he had done to deserve such a fate. After all, He had done everything as he had been told. The girl was confused by his question. Lana looked at Hal's back with disapproval. After all, this division of leadership rights with Samson led to terrible consequences. Because of someone's pride and ridiculous instructions, Mike suffered. While everyone was trying to come to their senses after what they had experienced, a camera in the corner of the corridor wall was watching them. The medical staff discussed the financial situation of one of the patients. Relatives must pay the bills regularly. Otherwise, the medical institution will not be able to cover the patient's expenses. It was about Hal's mother, who was looking out the window and waiting for her son to call. It seemed he hadn't been in touch for a long time. The mother does not let go of the phone and keeps waiting for her son to let her know about himself. After all, she has no one else. The medical workers looked at her with pity and said that they could no longer delay payment. After all, they had been covering the costs in debt for a long time. Hal's mother has been waiting for a long time for proper treatment and news from her son. Where he went is unknown. It was a boy's dream. His conscience tormented him for his abandoned mother, and his subconscious threw him prophetic dreams. He opened his eyes and decided to get out of here as quickly as possible. The boys tried to sleep in a scattered manner along the corridor. They didn't care about the conditions. The main thing was that they had the opportunity to take a nap. Far from everyone, under a cold wall, sat Mike. He covered himself with his remaining hand and looked at the floor. The boy tried to understand at what point everything went wrong and what he did wrong. This question was driving him into a dead end and was spinning in circles in his head. Following the instructions, he found himself in such a difficult situation, and he did not know who to blame for it. At that moment, he understood a lot for himself. Therefore, he stood up and looked at the boys with eyes that were no longer those of a child. After a short nap, the leader led his team further in search of rescue options. Anna decided to take on the responsibility of expressing everyone's opinion. She asked to give them a chance to rest, since they had been walking for a long time and had not eaten anything properly. Hal rejected her claims, because he wanted to get out of this labyrinth as soon as possible. He thought that he had let everyone sleep for too long. Sleep made him think about time and hurry up. Kim walked behind and whined that he was very tired. He asked Mike for water to quench his thirst a little. The boy carried a bottle in his hands, but did not react to the blonde's words. Kim began to make claims because of being ignored. Mike looked at him with disapproval, without saying a word. Only the most narcissistic person would take water from someone who had survived such a difficult operation. Kim was just such an egoist. He brazenly snatched the bottle and the boy from his hand, and even with claims. The blonde accused Mike of using all their food and water on him, as if he had asked to have his hand cut off. Lana said that despite such a long journey, they did not meet a single person. It was very strange. Suddenly, the girl's attention was drawn to a red puddle under her feet, which led somewhere. At the end of the corridor was a huge fire door, stained with red liquid of human activity. The picture was quite frightening. The boys were even scared to imagine what was happening in this place. After all, it looked like traces of a terrible massacre. Despite the general fear, Hal gave the order not to retreat, but to go straight there. This caused a dissatisfied reaction from the crew. Hal said that they have nowhere to go back to. There are dinosaurs behind them, and this is the only door in the entire corridor. Lana said that the Redder knew the picture behind and leaving it. You can think of something. They were all afraid of the unknown. Hal looked at this door as salvation, and he did not want to go back and waste time. The reason was his mother, who has very little time and she needs it. So Hal commanded everyone to follow him forward. The guy started moving, and the team started to panic and ask him to stop. He walked up to the door control panel and examined it carefully. Hal himself was afraid, but he simply had no other choice. So he had to quickly drown out the fear in his head and act. With a trembling hand, he finally pressed the button that opened the door and held his breath along with everyone else. The situation behind the door surprised the team very much. They even froze for a moment. After all, everyone expected to see monsters or something else scary. But before them opened a modern lounge for staff with a bunch of amenities. The team spent some time trying to figure out what the catch was and why there were so many signs of violence in front of the door to such a good place. They looked around and admired the interior and layout of the premises. Lana was confused by all this because it was not clear who this was all for, because there was not a single living soul anywhere except monsters. Anna was not too burdened by such questions because she found vending machines with food and drinks. Kim was very happy about this because he was incredibly hungry. He said that he would quickly get all the most delicious things and share them. after which the hungry blonde began to kick the machines with all his might so that the food would fall out. Kim overdid it and hurt his leg too much, so he started shouting. Hal noticed something and told the boys to be quiet for a while. A little further away stood a large sofa. The back of a human head was visible on it. From a distance, it seemed as if someone was resting there. Hal decided to come closer and talk to the mysterious stranger, but the man did not respond to his appeals. Lana also wanted to know who was in front of them and why he was silent, so she came closer. Coming closer, they saw a horrifying picture. Dozens of bodies lay on the floor in front of this man on the couch. They seemed to be breaking out of the laboratory pursuing some goals of their own. But apparently, they did not succeed. The bodies lay on top of each other, lining up in a pyramid. All these people were wearing red collars. Hal looked at them more closely and noticed traces of firearms on their bodies. It looks like their death was violent, and at the hands of a man. Dinosaurs had nothing to do with it this time. It was the work of the man sitting on the couch, who, by the way, was already dead. While Hal was investigating the murder, screams of girls were heard behind him. In front of them stood a half-naked guy with glass eyes and the same red collar. The girls were afraid of him, because the stranger appeared instantly and out of nowhere. The boys tried to ask him who he was, but the stranger's behavior suddenly changed. He started running towards Lana with a crazy look. The girl was very scared of this man's bad intentions, so she panicked and started screaming. Hal also decided that this guy wanted to attack, so he got ahead of him and hit him in the face with all his might. The stranger stopped, but there was not a single trace of the blow on him. It seemed that his skin was incredibly dense and invulnerable. He responded to Hal in kind a moment later. Only his blow was much more powerful. Hal was carried away a decent distance, as if he had been hit not by a person but by some kind of cyborg. The team leader did not expect such a reception, so he silently came to his senses after contact with this man. The stranger confidently approached the guy with wild eyes and unclear intentions. He silently extended his hand forward. His eyes were constantly open, as if he had not learned to blink. It was very frightening. Hal was already beginning to think that he wanted to harm him, but the stranger was reaching for his briefcase. No one expected that this man would behave so strangely and abruptly for the sake of an ordinary backpack. Lana tried to politely establish contact with him, asking who he was. The stranger was silent. Instead of answering, he came very close to the girl, making her nervous. He handed her the backpack and only briefly asked her to open it. The request was rather strange because even a child knows how to unzip a school bag. The girl was a little confused. While the guy was asking to open the backpack, Hal decided to attack the strange guy from behind. It must be said that this guy's reaction was lightning fast. After all, he instantly blocked Hal's blow, slightly dodging. The stranger turned his attention from Lana to Hal. He turned to him and stared at him with his glassy gaze. He didn't try to harm the team leader. He just kept asking to open the backpack. His behavior and requests confused Hal. He could not understand who was standing in front of him and why he was so strange. Taking a closer look at the stranger, Hal noticed a red collar around his neck. The corpses had the same collars. It was not clear whether he was a threat or a victim of circumstances. Hal tried to find out what he wanted from them and why he came here. In response, the stranger asked who they were, because he had never seen anyone like them here before. He continued asking the boys who they were and why they came to this place at all. Hal said it was too long a story. The guy asked her to give him his backpack back and to leave as if the meeting had never happened. The stranger raised the briefcase up and said that it was now his property, which he would not return. Hal began to get angry, because he did not understand at what point civilization degraded to the brazen appropriation of other people's things by force. Anna quietly tried to explain to the leader that this man was not quite right in the head. The girl meant that this guy had a collar. This meant that he was a local. She assumed that this guy had gone crazy in the constant conditions of surviving alone. After all, in their opinion, there are no other people here. Lana decided to unobtrusively ask the stranger if he knew what happened in this place. He held the briefcase tightly in his hands and answered briefly that he knew nothing. Kim suggested not to waste time chatting with a psychopath and just move on. The stranger suddenly straightened up like an antenna. It was as if he felt something with his whole body. After that, he grabbed his backpack and suddenly ran off somewhere without explanation or goodbye. Hal was excited by the quick theft of his backpack, so he wanted to catch up with the stranger and get his property back. This native deftly darted into the ventilation shaft, as if he was running from something. Hal shouted after him to give him the backpack. But the stranger only briefly warned him of the impending danger before leaving for the mine. After these words, he slammed the lid and disappeared from the boy's field of vision. He left as he came. Everyone was in a slight shock from their contact with the local psychopath, and Hal still couldn't believe that his backpack had been stolen so cleverly. The team's main panic mongers insisted on simply leaving the backpack with the wonderful guy. Anna claimed that there was nothing particularly valuable in it that would be worth pursuing. They hoped to calmly get food from the vending machines and continue on their way, but the local fauna had their own plans for this room. From behind the door came the eerie sounds of some creatures. The boys turned to look because the sounds were getting closer. They held their breath and peered fearfully into that small crack in the middle of the door. The terrible feathered monsters pushed the door open with their huge paws and intended to feast on the new arrivals. Kim said that he was pretty tired of these eternal quests. After all, every time his life was at stake. The dinosaurs slowly seeped into the room and prepared to hunt. Anna noticed a door at the other end of the room and suggested that the children run there for salvation. Hal thought that if this was a safe option for salvation, the stranger would have chosen it instead of the mine. He told the team to stop and not to consider that door as an exit, because the picture there could be much worse. The guy loudly and clearly told everyone to climb into the ventilation shaft after that stranger. He asked them not to hesitate in order to survive. The team was shocked by his demands because it seemed to them the easiest option was to run through a convenient door and climb the wall. Hal said that they had no time to argue, so he ordered them to do as he said. The team followed their leader without asking any questions, but there were still doubts. Anna was confused by the high location of the ventilation shaft, because there was very little time to get up there. The feathered monsters have already dealt with the obstacle on their way to food, and have almost climbed inside the room. Kim was quite a tall guy, but he still couldn't reach the entrance to the shaft on the wall. Hal, on some kind of crazy adrenaline, accelerated and jumped up to reach this shaft. He miraculously managed to grab the bars and hold on to them. With his muscular arms, he raised the grate so that everyone could climb in without any problems. His actions inspired delight in the team. It was like the work of a person with superpowers. Hal held the grate with one hand, extended the other down, and ordered everyone to climb up to him one by one. The dinosaurs screamed throughout the room, signaling their visit. They were hungry, ferocious, and very close. Hal pulled Kim towards him with great effort, as he was the heaviest of the crew. Then Kim held the bars while the leader pulled Anna out. The dinosaurs continued to oppress morally with their cries and approach. Despite this, Hal diligently pulled Lana to himself. The huge, feathered creature had already crawled halfway through the crack inside. It was a matter of seconds, because where the head fits, everything else will fit. Mark understood perfectly well what position he was in, and this made things even worse. Hal asked the boy not to panic and to give him his hand so that he could pull him out to the others. Mike obediently extended his hand, but the problem was that he was short and simply couldn't reach Hal. Meanwhile, the aggressive little animal was already halfway inside. Kim anxiously commented on the dinosaur's actions and asked the guys to finish faster. Hal realized he needed to bend down a little more. He did so and successfully grabbed the boy's hand. In this position, it was more difficult to pull him up. Plus, Mike now has only one arm and very little strength. Hal tried hard to pull the boy, but it was very difficult because the others somehow clung and helped. But this was not the case. Finally, after much effort, the dinosaur got inside and began to squeal terribly. After such a long time overcoming the obstacle, he became even more furious. Kim was panicking, Hal was tensing. Mike was barely breathing from horror. As soon as the mutant chickens started looking in their direction, Kim hysterically told Hal to abandon the boy in order to survive. Mike, of course, knew that Kim was a rotten person, but he didn't even suspect that he was that bad. Hal began to doubt, because he could not allow himself to die. His mother was waiting for him and a lot of obligations to her. When, after these thoughts, Hal's grip began to weaken, the one who cared most about Mike's life came to the rescue. Lana could not allow such an attitude towards a person's life, so she confidently grabbed his hand and helped him pull. Finally, the grate closed and the dinosaur's cry remained behind it. The guys could finally breathe out and relax for at least a couple of seconds. Kim still couldn't believe that they had managed to escape. These endless dinosaur chases had seriously shaken their psyche. Anna decided to thank Hal for his resourcefulness and dexterity. She admired him and openly flattered him. Kim decided to also stumble upon a compliment and reminded the girl how heroically he held the bars. Anna devalued this and said that any of us could hold it. Kim's words about throwing Mike into the dinosaur's mouth to save him kept playing in the boy's head on repeat. He also could not forget Hal's hesitation, for he really intended to let go of his hand. Mike suddenly realized that relying on anyone other than Lana here could be life-threatening. Kim noticed their new friend nearby and told the guys about it. The stranger was hiding around the corner and did not let go of the backpack. Hal told everyone to follow this strange guy. He scared the team a little, so they didn't really want to go to him. The leader explained that this stranger sensed the dinosaur approaching before it appeared. Therefore, this man knows a lot about this place and might be able to help. The boys were convinced that Hal's decisions were correct, so they crawled after him without arguing. Around the corner in the ventilation, a path through thin grates awaited them. They were above a room that emitted a poisonous red light. This mysterious room contained horrible experimental specimens. The bodies of people seemed to be marinated in some strange green liquid. The boys looked at these experimental games with human bodies and did not understand how it was possible to do this with living people. Not only were these people tied up, but they also had no lower limbs. It was hard for the boys to hide their disgust at what they saw. Hal wasn't interested in getting into it at all. He was in a hurry, so he told the team to stop staring and move on. No matter how many questions arose about what they saw, the team kept them to themselves and crawled after the leader. These specimens were very similar to each other. At this moment, it was not clear whether they were alive or not. Their eyes were closed, and their bodies were motionless. Kim could not tear his eyes away from them. He looked at one of them with fear and curiosity. During his stay on the island, he had seen similar people many times, sometimes in a dinosaur's lair, sometimes in the bushes on the beach. Previously, these identical corpses seemed to haunt Kim. After all, he was the one who kept running into them. Only before these were lifeless remains of bodies, and this one suddenly opened his eyes and stared straight at Kim. Meeting the mutant's eyes, the blonde began to scream hysterically. The grate was very thin and could not withstand the guy's panic attack. It instantly collapsed where Kim and Mike were crawling. Everyone turned around at the crash. First, the grate fell into the very heart of the experimental room, and then the guys. The girls looked down nervously from the ventilation. They asked if the boys were alive after falling from such a height. Mike sat silently on the floor while Kim complained of terrible pain in his leg due to a bruise. Safe movement through the mine was out of Hal's control, so he looked thoughtfully at the guys and thought about what to do. Anna tried to figure out what the leader would do. Kim, with a hysterical look, begged Hal to get him out of this terrible place. He said that he was very scared there. Hal was running through in his head the options for getting out of the situation in the most favorable way for himself. Anna asked the blonde to stand up, but he claimed that because of the pain in his leg, he could not do it on his own. The strange stranger, meanwhile, began to crawl somewhere quickly, disappearing from Hal's field of vision. While Kim desperately pleaded for help, the leader was worried that he might miss his chance to get out of here. Anna was worried about the blonde's injury and asked Hal what they should do. Kim saw the leader's face and began to get nervous that there would be no rescue. So he nervously asked whether he would be rescued now or not. Hal said coldly that he couldn't help the boys now because he had to follow that madman. He told them to try to find a way out on their own. These words were fatal for Kim. He had always disregarded the lives of others and finally felt what it was like. The girls froze and looked anxiously at the leader because they could not take responsibility for the abandoned guys. Hal told them to hurry. Hal was angry at their slowness, so he once again emphasized the importance of that stranger. He was sure that by following the local inhabitant, he could save himself and learn a lot of useful things. The leader extended his hand to Lana because she was on the other side of the collapsed grate. Under the cry of saving Kim, the girl had a hard time making a decision. Hal saw doubt in her eyes, so he asked her directly whether she was going or staying. The beauty timidly asked him what would happen to the guys if they left them here. Hal was already shouting that they had no other way out. Besides, the grate beneath them was about to collapse, and they needed to move on quickly. Lana glanced at the grate beneath her and was convinced of the leader's words. There really was no time for hesitation. The girl gathered her thoughts and climbed over to the others. Kim and Mike below understood that since she was gone, there was no hope. Kim never expected to find himself in such a situation. But life made him understand the value of managing the life of someone who counts on it. Lana returned and spoke loudly to the guys downstairs. She said that she would definitely come back for them and asked them to be patient for a little while. The girl promised with all her heart to return for them and not to leave them here for long. Mike and Kim froze. They did not expect to be abandoned. And to trust and wait in such conditions is very difficult. The place where the guys got stuck was pretty creepy. The many cells with mutant people in them didn't inspire a positive mood. Kim did not choose words to insult the team. It seemed mean to him that he was left to his fate. He was indignant about his situation and about this terrible place in which he would have to sit. The pain in his leg made the blonde regret his thoughtless hit on the food machine. With his characteristic rudeness, he demanded that Mike help him up. Mike did not react to his words, or rather, he simply ignored the impudent blonde. The boy peered closely at the liquid that was bubbling near the experimental samples. Kim was not happy with the disobedience, so he complained loudly about Mike's company. The blonde somehow got up, but still demanded help from the boy, because he was not able to move on his own. Mike turned to him, and with wild eyes asked why he should help someone like him. Kim was sure that purely out of compassion for his neighbor who could not walk, the boy should have helped him. The blonde didn't expect Mike to be mean, so he started talking about his grievances against the guys. Namely, against Lana, who, despite her kindness, followed the tyrant. Kim still remembered old grievances against Hal. Mike listened with contempt and waited. The blonde man, in a raised voice, condemned the leader for his unfair treatment of him. Kim swore that he would definitely get out of here and take revenge on Hal for this. But to do this, he had to at least get up. And only Mike could help with that. Mike calmly and briefly replied that he did not want to help him. The boy remembered very well how Kim had ordered Hal to throw him to the dinosaur for his own salvation. He reminded his talkative companion of this and said that, citing the past, he was not going to help him. Kim thought that he could force the boy into his place and make him respect him as before. What he didn't take into account was that Mike had changed a lot after the amputation. The boy kicked the blonde on his sore leg to show who was the king of the situation. Kim was curled up on the floor and holding his leg. He was in a lot of pain, so he screamed loudly. Mike decided to finish him off by saying that they had been abandoned. After all, he knew that Kim, because of his pride, would never even have thought that they would give up on him. The boy said that people like Kim always think too highly of themselves. But sooner or later, everything falls into place to turn their pride against them. Mike reached for the gas key with his remaining hand and continued to remind the blonde about his piggish attitude towards him. He said that he had not forgotten how he was dragged through the mud just because he was younger than everyone else. The boy calmly said that he always endured so as not to seem rude and to respect his elders. Kim, meanwhile, began to suspect something was wrong. Mike finally took the gas wrench, approached the blonde, and haughtily declared that such pathetic people do not deserve respect. Kim tried to get out of it until the very end. He claimed that he had never treated the boy badly. The blonde referred to the fact that Samson was always rude, and that Hal cut off his hand. Mike looked at him with the eyes of a serial killer and was not going to believe him. Kim screamed hysterically that his vein was gone and begged them to give up the idea of killing him. Mike took a swing and said that he never expected to hear an apology from such a pathetic person. The blonde decided to save himself by any means necessary, so he began to loudly ask the boy for forgiveness for everything he had done. He also promised never to hurt him again. Mike froze for a moment and looked into the eyes of his victim. Kim said that the boy was kind and could not harm his neighbor. He begged Mike to forgive him and continued to promise to treat him well in the future. The boy did not expect to hear so many good things from the lips of this impudent guy. He lowered the gas key and said that he was sorry to hear an apology only with threats. He also turned away and said that it was good to hear these words without violence, and much earlier. Kim was sweating from head to toe after this incident. When the boy lowered the tool, the blonde was sure that the danger had passed. Mike suddenly turned around and with a new swing declared that Kim's apology would not return his hand. Therefore, he could take them to the next world. This idea of revenge had been accumulating in the little boy's heart throughout his stay on the island. He had avenged every insult and contempt from the blonde and had solemnly dragged him to be disposed of. Kim was still alive when Mike picked up his broken head and told him not to get upset and to hope for the best. The boy dipped his head into the green liquid in which the bodies of the experimental specimens were immersed. Mike then said that he no longer held a grudge against him, because all people are fearful and first of all worry only about themselves. He did not give Kim a chance to escape and said that there was no point in resisting, because he would not be able to leave the island alive anyway. Meanwhile, Hal desperately tried to follow the stranger, but was confused for a moment because he lost sight of him. Anna continued to ask the leader why they should follow this madman. Hal claimed that since this guy knew his way around the area, he could show them the exit. He also hoped to ask about what was going on here. Anna still doubted, because she considered the stranger strange. Entrusting her life to a madman did not seem the best idea to her. Hal didn't care about the sanity of that guy. He firmly believed that the madman was their last hope of salvation. While the guys were indignant about the fact that they didn't even know what day it was or what time it was, Lana's thoughts were not with them. The girl kept looking back and wanted to go back for the guys because her conscience did not allow her to calmly move on. As soon as Lana decided to return, Anna saw a stranger nearby and informed everyone about it. She had to go after the others to quickly find an opportunity to escape, but she still intended to return and get the boys. Hal finally reached the lair of the strange guy, which was located in a nook of the ventilation shaft. The stranger sat on the floor in front of his meager supply of water, holding the backpack he had stolen. Seeing old acquaintances, he began to ask why they were following him. He began to think that it was because of the backpack. The madwoman screamed that she would not give it up, even if the guys tried to take it by force. Hal was surprised by this reaction. The leader said that he just wanted to talk. The stranger accused Hal of lying and again said that he would never give up the backpack. Anna continued to insist that this guy was not worth dealing with because he was crazy. The guy looked at them with his big eyes and did not want to make contact, seeing the guys as a threat. Hal said that there was no time for this. The leader was preparing to force the stranger to give them the information they needed and was already diligently warming up his fists for this. Lana suddenly intervened. She put her hand on the aggressive leader's shoulder, hinting that she would try to sort things out her own way. The girl approached the puzzled guy and politely asked his name in order to somehow more gently establish a dialogue. Since the stranger was silent, she decided to introduce herself first. Lana also calmly said that the guy could keep the backpack because they really came to talk. When the stranger was more open to conversation, she asked him to tell her about this place. But he only briefly replied that he knew nothing about it. Hal thought it was a lie because there were plenty of corpses around with the same red collars as this guy. So, he demanded an explanation. The stranger answered loudly that he really did not know how specimens B and C died. It was some kind of internal classification. Lana asked to tell about it in more detail. The guy claimed that samples A were moving separately, so he didn't know what happened to samples B and C. Lana was surprised, because it was strange to hear that in this place people were divided into certain categories, as if they were not people, but expendable material. The stranger himself had a badge of the type, a designation on his neck. This means that he was talking about himself and really did not intersect with the others. He claimed that earlier there had been an alarm signal. Everyone had rushed to the exit. Then it became quiet, and he had to go out too. Lana asked if anyone was helping the specimens in this place to exist. The guy said that there used to be people specially trained for this, but now there aren't any. Hal listened attentively, and after some time, the picture on this island became more or less clear to him. Anna asked him to share his conclusions with everyone. The leader reminded them that earlier, when Kim fell into the water in the botanical garden, he saw corpses at the bottom. He said that there were corpses there, but they were very unusual. They looked like people entangled in plants. Hal also remembered the strange mutation on Mike's hand after contact with plants, because of which the dinosaurs reacted so strongly to him. Hal suggested that this was a factory for breeding dinosaurs, and that people were here as food for them. It was even scary to imagine what else they would have to go through in this terrible place. Having heard these frightening conclusions, Anna grabbed her head and began to ask how to get out and find a way out of this hell. Sample A heard the word exit and reacted strangely. The boys turned to him. He said he knew where the exit was and went quiet. Apparently, they didn't pay enough attention to dialogue here, which is why the guy was communicating so strangely. Anna was delighted and went to him with a request to get them out of here as soon as possible. Sample A said that he could do it but did not want to and fell silent again. Hal's nerves were giving out. He grabbed the stranger by the collar and looked angrily into his eyes. The leader insisted that they were not to be trifled with. He ordered that they be shown the exit immediately. Otherwise, he threatened to kill the madman. Specimen A, with his usual crazy look, declared that Hal would regret his rudeness to him. The leader, although he was under the emotions of anger, was still a little frightened by the stranger's words. He remembered his mother again and was afraid that if he did something wrong now, he would miss the opportunity to help her. The memory of his loved one made him cast aside his fear and act confidently. He squeezed the madman's collar and said that he would make him talk at any cost. This fight was interrupted by Lana, who loudly mentioned Hal's backpack. The girl said that she would help the stranger open his backpack if he helped them get out of here. Anna looked at Lana with disdain. She believed that such a bargain would definitely not work. To everyone's surprise, Lana's idea attracted the attention of a madman. The beauty repeated that she would definitely open the backpack, and to do this, she just needed to show where the exit was. Specimen A grabbed Hal's arm forcefully to stop him from going to talk to him. He asked Lana to keep her promise about the backpack. The guy grabbed his backpack and headed off to show the guys the way, while everyone stared at his back in surprise. After all, only a weirdo could agree to such conditions. Hal looked at his hand, which was grabbed by Specimen A. The grip was so powerful that his bones were twisted in the opposite direction. The local inhabitant grabbed his backpack and headed from his hiding place to the ventilation shaft. He said that the exit is on the other side, so it won't take long to get there. The guys were already getting ready to head for the exit, but Lana stopped them. The girl asked where they were going to go without Mike and Kim, because they needed to come back for them. Lana claimed that the boys were counting on their return and help. They had to keep their word and return. She asked the stranger to pick up the boys first, and he unconditionally agreed to help them with this. Anna intervened in this conversation and stopped them. She said that no one would come back for them, because everyone wants to get out of this hole as soon as possible and not play Baywatch. In addition, Anna told the beauty not to pretend to be Miss Kindhearted, because according to her, they are not in a situation to sacrifice themselves for others. Lana was dumbfounded by these words. Anna looked at Lana with disdain and said that she was tired of hearing about the value of helping others. She told the beauty to take off her rose-colored glasses and stop pretending to be the kindest and most caring. Lana approached the impudent girl and said that she understood the complexity of the situation perfectly well. She also asked not to doubt her ability to sensibly analyze what was happening. She tried to explain to Anna that humanity is not a vice, and even in spite of danger, one can come up with a way to save the team members and not give up. Anna only turned away from her with a smirk and told her to sacrifice only her own life if she wanted to help someone so much. Lana turned hopefully to Hal, reminding him that they had promised the boys that they would come back for them. At this point, the leader was experiencing mixed feelings. He was sorry to abandon the guys, but he also did not want to sacrifice his priorities. Every time before making an important decision, the silhouette of his mother, who needed him, appeared before his eyes. So he apologized to Lana and said that he had deceived the guys because he had not originally intended to come back for them. Hal explained that they had neither the time nor the energy to travel back. When the leader said that, to his great regret, he could not act differently. Anna rejoiced. Lana realized that she had nothing to talk about with them, so she told them to move on. The girl herself was determined to return for the guys and help them get out. Finally, Lana also decided to express her opinion on some things. She said that she knew about Hal's desire to abandon Mike when they climbed into the ventilation. Lana didn't deny that it was probably for the greater good. After all, if it weren't for Hal, they wouldn't have been able to go such a long way and survive. She only asked why the boy's arm had to be amputated if he was not going to take responsibility for his life. Although Hal said at the time that this measure was for everyone's sake, in reality, he did it only to save himself. She asked the leader to face the truth and accept that he easily sacrificed other people for his own interests. Anna asked Hal not to listen to this self-confident girl and just go on without her. Lana scalded the leader with her words as if with boiling water. In the room of the terrible experimental symbiosis, everything was as before. Lana kept her word and returned through the ventilation. She loudly called the boys by name to make sure they were there. When the girl saw Mike, she happily informed him that she had returned for him. She was glad that the boy was alive, so she asked with a smile where Kim had gone. Mike didn't expect that they would come back, so he didn't even have time to come up with a signal regarding the blonde. But after a couple of seconds, he decided to say that Kim had dumped him. It wasn't hard to believe. Lana was not surprised. She said that people like Kim tend to think only about themselves. The girl understood that the boy would not be able to climb up to her, so she asked him to wait until she came down. The jump was high and a little scary, but still not fatal. At such moments, you need to think less and do more. A moment later, the beauty was already below. Lana landed not very softly, but bearably. She first asked the boy how he felt, and if everything was okay with him. He looked at her with surprised eyes and nodded. Without a single complaint, Lana began to look for a way to get out of this room because this place scared her. Mike asked her where the other guys went and why she was alone. Lana replied that they left in exactly the same way as Kim. Mike was worried that Lana had dealt with the guys the same way he had with Kim, so he carefully asked if Anna and Hal were alive. Lana had no idea why the boy was asking, so she said she had no idea. She just looked at the horrific mutations and promised Mike she'd get out of there. While Mike looked at her in surprise, the girl asked him not to stand still but to follow her. He obediently followed, leaving his little secret. Lana looked around carefully and said that they should follow the stranger's route to get out. She approached the huge automatic door and began to look for the control panel. The door was locked due to a breakdown of the main control panel. It was clear that someone had deliberately cut the wires and blocked the door. The girl was trying hard to fix the problem when Mike suddenly approached her. The boy asked why she came back for him, because he considered himself a burden in the eyes of others. Lana replied that she could not leave him here because she had promised to return. She was not afraid to make decisions, and also said that one cannot avoid problems. During the conversation, the girl masterfully connected the wires from the control panel in the right direction. Lana told the boy that despite the difficulties, you can always find a way out if you try a little. Her words meant so much to Mike. Thanks to Lana, he glowed with hope like a control panel on a remote control. The girl happily reported to the boy about the work successfully done. She laughed because she was finally able to apply her engineering profession in life. To move on, she lightly pressed the button that opened the door. The door slowly opened, but what was behind it shocked Lana and even made her swear. The reason for this reaction was our lost Samson, whom everyone had already buried. It was also a surprise for the blogger to meet the guys. They were emotionally trying to figure out from each other what was going on here. Lana asked in a raised voice where he had been all this time, because everyone thought he was dead. Samson began to justify himself that the path he had taken alone had almost really destroyed him. He was also interested in where the rest of the team had gone. Lana sadly replied that their paths had diverged just as their priorities had. Samson did not listen to the rest of the story and quickly began to push them inside, citing the fact that the door needed to be closed urgently. The blogger tried hard to block that door as if he was afraid of something. Lana was not happy that she was interrupted because the blogger himself asked her to tell about the others and did not listen to the end. Samson, with a glassy gaze, asked them if they had met anyone strange on their way. Lana did not understand what he was asking about and asked him to explain in more detail. A blogger emotionally told about a guy who tried to kill him. He said that he tortured him and the VTube star almost said goodbye to life. Samson claimed that they were not alone here and was sure that the guys must have met someone suspicious on their way. Lana immediately remembered the strange stranger who accompanied Anna and Hal to the exit. Specimen A fit the description of Samson perfectly. After all, he was insane and had unclear intentions. The thought that the boys found themselves in the company of a cruel madman really scared Lana. To understand how Samson survived, we need to go back a couple of hours. Namely, to the moment of discussing the amputation of Mike's arm. The blogger was then apart from everyone and slyly glanced at his phone. When the power suddenly went out, he realized that this was his moment of glory. Samson rushed to the phone with the speed of light and pulled the charger out of it. As soon as he took his treasure, he immediately took off running. It seemed fair to him to leave these rebels to their fate. The blogger was confident that luck was always on his side and did not even notice the approach of danger. A ferocious dinosaur grabbed him by the shirt and was about to eat him whole. The exit was right before his eyes, so he was determined not to give up. This feathered monster sank its huge claws into Samson's back. This caused his shirt to turn red. Fueled by adrenaline and a desire to live, the blogger took off his shirt and threw the dinosaur away. Taking advantage of the moment, Samson quickly ran to the exit on his heels. He shared his escape story with Lana and Mike.